Chapter 2146. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. He said, "Don't be fooled by the fact that this brother doesn't look like much. He is a big shot with a noble status and a rich family background. The things you are looking for, it is definitely right to look for him. It is even better that he is willing to give you a name. Indeed, other people might not be able to get the inheritance of the demon race, but Yarrow Ningning definitely could. If even Yarrow Ningning couldn't get it, it could only be said that there was no such inheritance in this world. If Yarrow Ningning wanted to give someone a name, it had to be bestowing a name." Yarrow Ningning looked at Chu Yang with a tragic expression. He really didn't know what to say. What did Big Brother say just now? Although it seemed to have helped him, what did that sentence, "although this brother doesn't look like much," what did it mean? Am I not that good looking? Hey, then what name are you going to give me? I won't do it if it doesn't sound good. Little White raised her head and looked at Yarrow Ningning. There was a lot of expectation in her big eyes. Yarrow Ningning suddenly felt that at this moment, his heart was suddenly hit hard. For a moment, there was a kind of poetic feeling in his heart. It was as if such a day was like a poem or a painting. The girl in front of him was fair and beautiful. Even the faint freckles on the bridge of her nose were so charming. Yarrow Ningning said dizzily, "Your name is Bai Shi. Xian, okay?" He wanted to give her the name Bai Shi, but he was really a little dizzy. He actually said Xian out of nowhere. That meant that he was already dizzy and was about to start spinning. Bai Shi Xian. Little White's eyes lit up. She lowered her head and thought for a while. Then, she raised her head again. Her eyes flashed with surprise and she looked at Yarrow Ningning with some admiration. She said, "Big brother, you are really good. You are really good. Okay. I will be called Bai Shi Xian from now on. Thank you for giving me such a nice name." Yarrow Ningning was overjoyed when he heard that. To be praised by a little beauty like this so suddenly, he suddenly felt as if he was floating on the clouds. He shook his head and smiled reservedly. "You flatter me, you flatter me. Little brother has only studied a few more years. Although you are also very knowledgeable and know everything about heaven, earth, and the three sects, what I know is still limited. I only know a little, a little. You are really amazing." Bai Shishuan's eyes were wide open and her face was full of worship. "You flatter me, you flatter me. Wahahaha." Yarrow Ningning wanted to be humble at first, but she couldn't help but laugh out loud. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma, the two great saints, could not bear to watch and turned their heads away again. "Our family's Grand Master is really incurable. It's too weird. No, it's simply godly. Sigh, no matter what, he was still the only one in this world. How could he be so stupid? He didn't have a bit of stability. He was usually stronger, but once he saw a beautiful girl, why would he suddenly be at a loss? In our Demon Emperor Heaven's palace, there are really many beautiful girls. We have all kinds of girls. Why did he look so steady at that time? Why can't he be steady now?" Little White, henceforth officially changed her name to Bai Shi Xian, Bai Shi Xian. She was beating the snake with the stick, following by Yarrow Ningning's side, asking questions here and there. Unexpectedly, she knew nothing about this world. She was even more ignorant than a certain madam. Actually, it was no wonder. A certain Little White had been following Mo Qingwu since it was very young. All the resources it got were the best. Mo Qingwu even treated it like a precious treasure. How could it know about the hardships of the world? It just had to have a pure and innocent personality, asking about everything it got. It was simply possessed by 100,000 whys. It was rare for Yarrow Ningning to have such a chance to show off his profound knowledge. He introduced it without stopping. Every time after a long speech, he would always attract Bai Shi Xian's admiring gaze. This result made Yarrow Ningning feel even more dizzy and disoriented. It's rare to have such a beautiful woman who admires me so much. At this point in life, what else can I ask for?" Yarrow Ningning's mood became even better when she thought of the difficulties she faced in pursuing a woman and the awkwardness of not being able to say a single word despite all the hardships she went through. Bai Shi Xian was also a little embarrassed. After the initial surprise, she felt a little uncomfortable. Well, rather than saying that she was uncomfortable, it was better to say that she felt out of place. Because she always felt that there was a clear gap between her identity and Chu Yang and the others. Chu Yang was Mo Qingwu's lover, and she was Mo Qingwu's pet. This just didn't feel right. She always felt that she was inferior to others. Although there were things that she needed to do, she was duty-bound to do it. But usually, she didn't want to get so close. And she really didn't know much about these matters of the world. If she asked others, they would probably be impatient after a few words. But now, she met Yarrow Ningning, who liked to teach others. This was really a perfect pair, and they complemented each other. Yarrow Ningning didn't stop showing off his profound knowledge to win the adoring gaze of the beauty. He was getting more and more carried away, and the more he talked, the more he talked. From time to time, he even threw a smug look at Chu Yang and Tan Tan. The meaning couldn't be more obvious. Look, you don't know these things, right? But I know. Chu Yang and Tan Tan were completely speechless. Especially Chu Le, who teased him from time to time. Really? So it's like this? There's actually such a thing? Oh my god. So Yarrow Ningning became even more smug, complacent, and high-spirited. In any case, he just started to show off. However, letting Bai Shixian stay with Yarrow Ningning, when passing through this Yama gorge, their safety was undoubtedly greatly increased. Chu Yang felt that he had one less worry. Looking at it this way, this arrangement wasn't bad. It was very ideal. Thus, the group of people entered Yama's gorge with ease. This kind of special atmosphere was something that no one had expected before this. Others could relax a little, but Chu Yang couldn't. With a wave of his hand, the tribulation divine soul that had recovered 80% of its strength flew out silently, and took the lead to enter the Yama gorge. Then, Chu Yang took the lead and walked in. As soon as he entered, the tribulation sword appeared in his hand with a clang. As he walked in, Chu Yang actually couldn't see the sword light of the tribulation sword in his hand after a distance of less than 100 feet. This thick darkness had actually reached such a level. It was truly frightening. Someone tried to light a torch with the intention of illuminating the heavenly road. However, the torch was clearly burning, but no light appeared in this dark place. Could this place be the legendary dark shadow of the primordial world? It doesn't exist in all the light of the world, Tan Tan said doubtfully. Tan Tan said this in a very low voice. But when it fell into the ears of Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma at the back of the group, it was like a sudden clap of thunder, and the two couldn't help but sway a few times. Since ancient times, there was a divine being who created the world, and turned the eternal darkness into two parts, heaven and earth, clear and turbid. From then on, there were mountains and rivers, sun, moon and stars, and there were birds and flowers. However, the most primitive and fundamental darkness couldn't be completely removed. They could only use absolute power to gather the darkness of the world into one place, and become the land of eternal night. No light could be seen in that place, no matter what it was, no matter how big it was. Whether it was the three lights of the sun, moon and stars shining, or the monstrous fire, it was difficult to shine in the slightest. Because that place was chaos, the darkest darkness. In other words, it was the most mysterious place in the world. The place where the universe's main body was. There had always been such a guess, but no one had ever confirmed it. Over time, the world had only regarded it as a mysterious place, and had become indifferent to the original guess. But today, Tan Tan's sudden words had brought up this old matter again. This made people ponder deeply. The universe's main body was immortal and indestructible, and it existed eternally. How could a small king of hell compare to it? If it was really the shadow of the primordial world, then naming it King of Hell's Gorge was really blasphemous. The group walked into the legendary King of Hell's Gorge in such a strange place of darkness. At the same time, in the depths of King of Hell's Gorge, the Mo Yuntian soldiers who had been lying in ambush here before were also dissatisfied. How are we going to fight an ambush here? We can't see anything, what's there to fight? That's right, we're so close to each other. I can feel the smoothness of your thighs, but I can't see your body, let alone fight with the enemy. Screw your mother's thighs. Can your words not be so erotic and ambiguous? But you're right, there's no way to fight this battle. We can't distinguish between the enemy and our own people. We have at least a few hundred times more people than the enemy. Once the battle starts, the chances of us killing more people than the enemy will increase by tens or even hundreds of times. Sigh. I think Marshal Yu has never been here before. If he had, I believe he wouldn't have given such an order. That's right, but this kind of ambush is really too fucked up. How can there be such a strange place in Demon Emperor Heaven? It's one thing for Saint-level and Heaven-level cultivators to not be able to see anything here, but even Heaven-level cultivators become blind here. What the fuck is this? What should we do? How would I know what to do? The Mo Yuntian army had really invested a lot this time. Close to 20,000 people had already entered here to lie in ambush, waiting for the arrival of Chu Yang's group. But facing such a situation, everyone was helpless. For a moment, complaints were everywhere. General Meng's order. A low voice transmitted the order. But it caused everyone to quieten down. In a while, when the operation starts, everyone is to attack with all your strength towards the target position. Unleash his strongest attack. Then listen to the wind to determine the position. Wherever you hear a strange sound, attack that place. Yes. It had to be said that Meng Wu Ya's command was the only way to fight in such a bad geographical situation. Even if Mo Tianji was here, he would not have a better idea. They could only use this kind of method that couldn't be considered a method. Chapter 2147. There was only endless darkness in this place. Consciousness could not penetrate, could not communicate, could not see, could not see, could not see, could not see. Other than this, there really was no other way to attack. After 3 attacks, immediately charge in echelon formation, line up in the gorge, charge forward in a long line. No matter what you encounter, kill them all. After charging through, immediately return to the entrance of the gorge to meet with the main group. After charging 10 times like this, the remaining troops go to the other side of Yama Gorge and wait. Wait for the survivors of the enemy. Meng Wuya finished speaking, but everyone quieted down in shock. Everyone thought of one thing. If they used such a method to attack, they believed that none of Chu Yang and the others would survive. It was extremely vicious. But the problem was that there was still a yarrow tie inside. Marshal Yu had ordered them not to act rashly. Then what should they do? They believed that the yarrow tie would not be able to survive such a terrifying attack. Especially in such a special geographical environment. Even if they wanted to hold back, they did not have the power. Did they really have to kill the yarrow tie as well? Did General Meng's order mean something like this? Chu Yang and the others lined up in a long snake formation and gradually entered the legendary Yama's Gorge. At this time, they did not know what was in front of them, or where the enemy was lying in ambush. All of their consciousness was useless here. Once they were more than a foot away, they could not detect anything. It was the first time they had encountered such a strange place in their lives. Even Saint-level experts like Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma were the same. The consciousness that they had once thought could reach anywhere was useless now. Chu Yang was at the front, the calamity sword in his hand. He carefully felt for any movement in front of him. If the tip of his sword encountered any obstruction, Chu Yang would immediately change the direction of his advance. He paid more attention to his feet to ensure that each step was firm and did not make a mistake. Just like that, they advanced about 300 meters without any danger. Everything was calm like an ancient well without ripples. In this place of extreme darkness, Chu Yang was completely focused. He did not dare to be careless for a moment. The enemy definitely had an ambush here. Once they came into contact, the next attack would be a killing blow. If I was lying in ambush in such a special geographical environment, what method would I use to kill the enemy? Chu Yang asked himself as he put himself in his shoes. The next moment, he looked at the endless darkness around him and sneered. That's right. Under such circumstances, only a large-scale, indiscriminate carpet attack would be relatively effective. In the current situation, this was the only way to attack. Everyone, pay attention to the movements on both sides. Be on guard against any possible enemy attack, Chu Yang said in a low voice. Behind him, Bai Yuchen and the others passed on the message one by one. Tan Tan was behind Chu Yang. Speaking of which, this was the first time that these two martial brothers had joined hands to fight in the heavenly imperial court. Tan Tan Shin's fighting spirit was already burning fiercely, and had climbed to the peak. The divine soul of Calamity was also at a loss, because most of the divine soul of Calamity relied on its divine sense to fight. Once it entered this place, it only had the most basic sense of hearing, smell, and touch left. The divine soul of Calamity wasn't used to this situation. But fortunately, its other unique method hadn't lost its effect yet. It instantly scattered thousands of soul bodies, and looked for the enemy in all directions. But it hadn't found them yet. Under normal circumstances, the divine soul of Calamity would be able to feel it as long as the scattered soul bodies touched something, because it was a part of its body. But in this place, as long as the scattered soul bodies were more than 3 feet away, it wouldn't be able to feel anything even if it touched something. Without feeling, it couldn't command the soul bodies to fight as it wished. It could only use the scattered soul bodies' first command to operate, and its consciousness would instinctively return after the command ended. This made the divine soul of Calamity very embarrassed, and also caused its movement speed to be extremely slow. It was so slow that even it couldn't bear it. But the divine soul of Calamity didn't know that its current movement speed was faster than that of an ordinary person. In other words, it was faster than everyone in the canyon, at least twice as fast. This was an extremely huge advantage. Chu Yang held the Calamity sword, and moved forward steadily. Puff! The tip of the sword suddenly came into contact with a hard object. Based on the feeling of contact, the hard object should be a rock. Chu Yang slightly turned his direction, and the tip of the sword in his left hand came into contact with another rock at the same time. Chu Yang roughly estimated that the passage between Yama's gorge was only about 10 feet wide. This width should already be the narrowest part of the gorge. It seemed that the narrowest part they were talking about should be this section. In other words, the enemy's ambush should be nearby, and the battle was about to begin. Chu Yang took a deep breath. Behind him, everyone heard him take a deep breath. This was a signal. The battle was about to begin, and the mad dash for life was about to begin. From here, there was an open space. Only here, they needed to run with all their might. With their fastest speed, in the shortest amount of time. Chu Yang stomped his foot and sent out a signal. The Calamity sword suddenly burst out with extremely strong sword energy, and his body shot out like an arrow leaving the bow. Behind him, there was a whooshing sound of something breaking through the air. Behind him, Tan Tan did not hesitate, and quickly followed like a shadow. Then, Bai Yuchen and the others entered one by one. As long as they followed the sound of something breaking through the air, and as long as Chu Yang, who was at the front, did not encounter any obstruction, there was no problem in moving forward. Suddenly, there was a loud shout in the air, "Attack!" Then, countless unusually fierce gusts of wind whistled down. Chu Yang could imagine that there would be danger in this narrow place, and that there would be an ambush by the enemy. Then, how could the ambushers who were also experienced in the martial world not think of this point? They naturally chose to set up an ambush in the place where it was easiest to cause harm. Countless gusts of wind, attacks, and hidden weapons all fell like a storm at the first moment. Every attack in this wave of attack was a fatal blow from an expert with all his strength. It was so much so that the majority of them actually collapsed after unleashing that attack. For a saint-level expert to collapse from a single blow, one could only imagine the power of this attack. And now, at this moment, there were thousands of such fatal attacks coming at the same time. Everything was filled with the intent of death. No life, no life, no life. Chu Yang roared, and the Calamity sword in his hand danced fiercely. 2 majestic sword lights, one on the left and one on the right, actually emitted a faint light even in this pitch-black universe. Calamity sword. Clouds and clouds gather. As long as I'm alive, there will be no worries. 2 majestic sword lights rushed back from the left and right, protecting everyone on his side under the sword lights. At the same time, Chu Yang rushed out. Calamity sword, a brand new move of the soul, once again the ultimate move of the enemy. What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? His body was like a ray of light as he rushed forward at an extremely fast speed. And Bai Yu Chen and the others behind him completely carried out Chu Yang's words, "Protect yourself, and rush forward with all your strength." They did not care about the 2 waves of fatal attacks at all, and only rushed toward Chu Yang's body with all their might. They trusted him without reservation, and used their lives to try. Bang! Suddenly, an extremely strong impact sound was heard in the canyon. Then, a series of pa sounds resounded. It was the sound of Chu Yang's sword light and the enemy's attack intertwining with each other. Puff puff Bai Yu Chen and the others spat out a mouthful of blood in unison. The 2 weaker cultivators finally couldn't hold on any longer. In an instant, their bones and tendons broke, and their bodies fell to the ground like mud. Crack! Che Shuchu's right arm was fractured and bent at a strange angle. However, he still gritted his teeth and rushed over without saying a word. He didn't hesitate at all. He only had one thought in his mind. He rushed over according to Chu Yang's instructions. Chu Yang's 2 layers of protection were already at the pinnacle of protection. He believed that even a saint-level expert might not be able to break through them easily. However, because they were too scattered, they still had to face the terrifying power of the joint attack of hundreds of experts. It was inevitable that there would be casualties among the troops. There was a limit to a person's strength. Even the most powerful calamity sword technique had its limits. Even if they used all their strength to protect themselves, less than 10% of them would be able to escape this fatal attack. Fortunately, Chu Yang's side did not only have Chu Yang, but also had 2 beginner saint-level experts. Almost at the moment when the 2 layers of protection were about to collapse, the protection released by the 2 saint-level experts showed great effect. It actually protected the remaining people and allowed them to safely rush over. At the same time, there were continuous screams coming from above. The calamity spirit finally found its target. Under the natural cover of darkness, it started a massacre. In such a unique environment, as long as the calamity spirit locked onto its target, it would be in a completely invincible state. No one could kill the calamity spirit in such an environment. Even its original body could not be found. However, it could launch a fatal attack on anyone. The calamity spirit gradually became familiar with this environment. It was confident that in this environment, it no longer had to fear any expert in the world. Chapter 2148. Although there was a change in the battle situation, Mo Yuntian's soldiers were indeed well trained in battle. Although the enemy's counterattack was unexpected, they still followed the initial strategic arrangement and attacked indiscriminately, continuing to vent their attacks on the ground below. In that extremely dark place, a sword light flew forward like a shooting star. It was the only light in this dark world. Chu Yang's calamity sword. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma, the 2 saints, did their best to protect the entire team, trying their best to resist wave after wave of attacks. Both of them felt as if they were being smashed by thousands of mountain-splitting hammers without any break. Although their cultivations were already at the level of beginner saints, and although the enemy's strongest attack was only at the peak of celestial being, both of them still felt that it was difficult to move forward. They were only passively protecting so many people. As the saying goes, even ants can bite an elephant to death. What's more, they were facing thousands of people who were attacking with all their might against 2 saints who couldn't fight back for the time being. It didn't take long for the 2 of them to reach their limits. But they still didn't dare to slack off and supported with all their might. Chu Yang took the lead, and rushed forward. What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world? His sharp sword energy instantly tore apart all the attacks that were affected by the sword light. He cleaved open a path in front of the densely packed attacks, and led everyone to fight bravely. Thick devil energy enveloped Tan Tan's body as he followed closely behind Chu Le. Then, Chu Le grabbed Tan Tan's clothes from the back with one hand, while her other hand released poison energy with all her might. The complete version of the ultimate heavenly poison divine technique was continuously released from Chu Le's hand, forming a zone of death in this dark place. Bai Yu Chen and the rest followed behind Chu Le and rushed past. In this way, they left the poisonous fog behind them. They had all been given the antidote by Chu Le beforehand, so they didn't have to worry about it. But if there were pursuers behind them, they wouldn't be so lucky. After 2 waves of attacks, even though Chu Yang's side tried their best to protect, they still couldn't avoid losing 4 people. Out of the 32 people, only 28 were left. And the 2 saints' protection was also a little exhausted and couldn't hold on much longer. If not for the fact that the Calamity Divine Spirit was on a killing spree and attacking with all its might, the number of casualties might have doubled. Or even more. Chu Yang was already putting his life on the line. His Dantian was releasing his essence energy at the same time. His Calamity Sword was still a move of what harm is there in slaughtering the world. His speed was indescribably fast. Right now, offense is the best defense. From above, Meng Wu Ya suddenly shouted, "Attack that light. Try your best to get rid of that light." Everyone who heard the order changed their target one after another, and attacked Chu Yang's location with all their might. However, Chu Yang was already in an explosive state. Even though the sword light was facing countless attacks, it was still not extinguished. It continued to advance forward at the highest speed. No matter how many attacks fell on his body like a waterfall, his sword did not stop, not even for a moment. After enduring 2 waves of attacks, Meng Wuya's people were stunned. Was this person made of iron? Pui, definitely not made of iron. No matter what kind of iron it was, under such a chain attack, it would have long turned into iron slag, iron dust, or even iron dust. However, Chu Yang was still standing. In everyone's eyes, this was an out-and-out miracle. Above, the Calamity Spirit once again let out a sharp whistle. Invisible and formless attacks, one after another, without any warning, inexplicably had their necks broken, their heads smashed, and their hearts dug out. However, they did not even see the shadow of the enemy who attacked them. "It's the Calamity Spirit." Meng Wu Ya's pupils shrank. In the darkness, he shouted, "Execute the second plan." If they still fought according to the first plan, even if it was effective, more than half of their people would be killed by the Calamity Spirit. They could only force their way down and face it head-on. As long as they were mixed with the enemy, the Calamity Spirit would not be able to distinguish between friend and foe. They could only passively stop. This was the safest way. Although in this way, it was inevitable that they would not be able to distinguish between friend and foe, and the possibility of being killed by mistake would be infinitely greater. However, it was still better than being a target and being slaughtered. In just a few breaths' time, the enemy had already rushed over 2,000 feet. And in this 2,000 feet, the Calamity Spirit had killed more than 1,500 people. Even though the majority of the troops Meng Wu Ya was leading were not his own troops, they still could not bear such a huge number of casualties. After the first team heard the order, they did not hesitate to soar up and descend into the narrow passage below. Chu Yang let out a long whistle. No one could guess the use of this whistle. Only the Calamity Spirit understood tacitly. It rushed down like a whirlwind and stood beside Chu Yang. "You help me open up a path in front." Chu Yang's voice sounded very weak. The continuous attacks just now had made him look like he was still standing. In fact, Chu Yang had already suffered extremely heavy injuries. However, Chu Yang could not fall down. He deeply knew that if, once he fell, it would be a blow to his troops, whether it was physical or mental. Furthermore, it would be a fatal blow to his psyche. It would inevitably lead to a moment of panic and even collapse. Even if they did not collapse, the people he had led would be annihilated in less than a quarter of an hour as long as that kind of panic took shape. There was no such thing as a fluke. Therefore, Chu Yang could only hold on with great difficulty. Now, the enemy had finally taken the initiative to change their tactics. Has the turnaround come? Chu Yang let out a muffled groan. He then pulled out the 2 throwing knives from his body. On the other side, Tan Tan helped him in a casual manner. The hidden weapons on Chu Yang's back, legs, and shoulders were all silently pulled out by Tan Tan. Then, all of them disappeared with a flick of his wrist. These 2 martial brothers did not speak. It seemed as if they were equally calm. However, Tan Tan's heart tightened. He knew how deep these hidden weapons had been embedded in Chu Yang's muscles when he pulled them out with his own hands. These things could take a person's life. Just one of them was enough to make a first-rate expert lose his life. However, Chu Yang's body had been pierced by so many of them. There were no less than dozens of them. In addition, Chu Yang had also endured the sharp palm energy and the sharp sword energy. It was as if a huge axe had been used to split a mountain. Needless to say, Chu Yang's injuries were very serious. Tan Tan said to himself in his heart, "I will stand in front of Chu Yang if there's another attack. He won't be able to hold on. He will only be sending Chu Yang to his death if he continues to hold on. Moreover, the enemy is very strong. I'm afraid that I have to be prepared. I might even be prepared to die. Let me die in front of my brothers if I have to die." Tan Tan Xin re-evaluated these enemies and made this decision. Chu Yang forced a smile. He raised his hand and put the last super heavy pill into his mouth. This was the last life-saving trump card that Chu Yang had left after the tribulation space was sealed. There was only one left. He could only rely on his own strength to support himself if he encountered another crisis like the previous one, and the tribulation space still couldn't be opened. He wouldn't have another heavy pill to save his life. However, looking at the current situation, Chu Yang couldn't help but sigh. The road ahead is boundless. I don't know where it ends. Since I still have the strength, I will endure it one more time. It's impossible to not get injured in such a situation. For my brothers, for my little sister, for my comrades who have accompanied me through life and death, I will endure until the last moment. A strong wind suddenly rose in front of him. A terrifying and oppressive aura that was even stronger than before suddenly rushed over from the front. It was obvious that the enemy had launched an attack again. Moreover, they were launching an attack with a new attack mode. The tribulation's divine soul screamed. It instantly turned into a mass of grey fog and rushed forward. Chu Yang was about to follow it. However, he saw Tan Tan, who had been following behind him, suddenly pull him to the back. Tan Tan was now in front of him. A hoarse laughter echoed, "Senior brother, it's my turn this time." Chu Yang was startled when he heard this. It wasn't that he was surprised by Tan Tan's action. In fact, Tan Tan's action wasn't surprising at all. In fact, Tan Tan's action was within Chu Yang's expectations. What really surprised Chu Yang was that voice. Tan Tan's voice was low and hoarse. It clearly wasn't Tan Tan's original voice. It was the voice of the Devil King. However, it was this Devil King's voice that called out the two words "senior brother" for the first time. How could Chu Yang not be surprised? To Chu Yang's surprise, Tan Tan let out a long roar and rushed up behind the tribulation's divine soul. Chu Le became the person who grabbed Chu Yang's clothes. Relying on Chu Yang's momentum to move her body forward, she didn't have any distractions, and used all her strength to poison. Although Chu Yang's team didn't have any enemies behind them for the time being, which meant that Chu Le had spent a lot of energy only to create an empty passage filled with poison. It was almost meaningless. However, Chu Le knew that Chu Yang must have his reasons for doing so. Therefore, even though she was constantly releasing her poison into the air, Chu Le still strictly carried out Chu Yang's orders. In the darkness ahead, sounds of fierce collisions, screams, and muffled groans could be heard one after another. Chu Yang followed closely behind Tan Tan, burying his head as he rushed forward. He constantly felt that there were people passing by him, and as those people passed by him, they would definitely attack him. In addition to protecting Tan Tan's back and himself, Chu Yang also had to protect Chu Le. He didn't even hesitate to launch the sharpest counterattack to everyone who passed by him. The tribulation sword silently swallowed and spat at an extremely fast speed. There was constantly a slight feeling of the sword cutting into a person's body coming from his palm. Chapter 2149. Behind him, Bai Yuchen and the rest formed a long line and rushed forward from the center. Even if the enemies on both sides managed to escape from Chu Yang's sword, they would still be attacked by their combined forces. Those who were lucky managed to make it a few hundred feet to the end of the group. However, the poison that Chu Le had been continuously laying down previously took effect, and they fell to the ground without a sound. After Chu Le obtained the Poison King's inheritance, her poison techniques improved immediately. Many areas that were difficult to break through previously were solved easily. In the past, the targets that her poison techniques could target stopped at the beginner level of celestial being. Now, although she had only obtained the Poison King's inheritance for a short time, this limit had been broken. Now, even second-level celestial being experts would be restrained as long as they came into contact with Le'er's sky poison. If they came into contact with it for too long, they would still be in danger of dying. If they wanted to stay within the range of Le'er's poison for a long time, they would have to be at least high-level or even peak celestial being to survive. Of course, saint-level experts could still be immune to Le'er's poison. However, among the enemies in front of them, only Meng Wuya had this ability. The divine spirit fought with all its might while absorbing the death energy from the enemy. The cultivation of the enemies here was not weak. After they died, the nourishment provided by their souls was naturally more abundant. This made the divine spirit feel an indescribable excitement. The line of people continued to move forward like this. The situation was actually much more stable than before. There were no casualties for the time being. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma, who were at the back of the group, also took the opportunity to adjust their breathing. As a saint-level expert, as long as they were not severely injured, their recovery speed was extremely fast. In just a short moment, their elemental energy, which was almost completely depleted, had actually recovered by more than 70 to 80%. As the passage was really too narrow, the enemies on the other side could not charge over in a large area. At most, only 5 people could pass through each wave. However, those who were lucky enough not to die in the hands of the divine spirit still had to face the attacks from behind. Their only choice was to hide again. However, they could only avoid the center and go to the sides. However, even if they went to the sides, they still had to endure another form of attrition warfare. One person after another attacked. Before the person who attacked could go far, the next wave of attacks had already arrived. Casualties were everywhere for a while. Not a single person was able to rush to the back of Chu Yang's team. So, they died in this long passage. Everyone was silent, feeling the warmth of the blood that splashed on their faces. The Calamity Soul unleashed its might at this moment. It gave full play to its characteristics of being invisible, unafraid of attacks, and unafraid of injuries. In this special environment that seemed to be a natural fit for it, it was invincible. He took the lead and slaughtered his way through the surging crowd, leaving a bloody path behind. He absorbed the aura of death as he walked, and in an instant, he had already rushed out about 1,000 feet. Dense devil fog was rising from Tan Tan's body. He was unceasingly attacking. His attacks were even heavier, more ruthless, and more overbearing. Other than that, he was also very greedy. As long as the person died, the storage ring would be in his hands in a flash. Chu Yang, who was standing behind him, even had a certain King of Hell's personality of taking advantage of every opportunity, yet he still didn't manage to get anything out of it. From this, it could be seen how meticulous this fellow was in plundering everything. Later, the Calamity Soul and Tan Tan formed a kind of tacit understanding. As long as a person died, the aura of death would naturally be absorbed by it, and the storage ring would be given to Tan Tan. One demon and one soul started a massacre, bravely charging in front. The Calamity Soul continuously used the aura of death to strengthen itself. Tan Tan fought and swallowed the inner cores of spirit beasts along the way. The two of them were like two fighting machines that never stopped. They continued to push forward in the mode of a meat grinder. Moreover, their speed was astonishingly fast. Chu Le, who wasn't far away from Tan Tan, didn't know about all this. Only Chu Yang saw it clearly. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry in his heart. These two bastards didn't forget to make money from the war even when they were facing death like this. That Calamity Soul. Does it still remember who your master is? It's still trying to help others. Don't you know that your master is very weak now? Don't you know how to take care of your master first? However, the Calamity Soul and Tan Tan's good days soon came to an end. That was because the more they went forward, the more they could feel that the terrain ahead was getting wider and wider. In this way, More and more enemies were rushing over this time. Gradually, the Calamity Soul felt that it was stretched to the extent of being stretched. There were so many opponents. It was impossible to kill them all in one move and then face the next wave of enemies. Change the mode of attack. Change to a pointed cone and rush out. You don't need to kill a lot of enemies anymore. Your only task is to rush out with all your strength. Chu Yang's order sounded in a timely manner. The Calamity Soul let out a shrill cry. In people's ears, it was as if the gates of hell had suddenly opened, and thousands of malicious ghosts had rushed out at the same time. Bang 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 puff puff puff. The demon fog on Tan Tan's body was getting thicker and thicker. His cultivation was much stronger than when he had entered the canyon. He suddenly shouted, and took a step forward. He and the Calamity Soul were rushing forward side by side. The two of them hesitated for a moment, and then rushed forward. After this wave, the number of people who died in Tan Tan's hands was almost less than the number of people who died in the Calamity Soul's hand. This result greatly shocked the divine soul of the Calamity. How can such a freak appear? He was clearly only a saint-level expert before the battle. But now, he has soared to the primary level of the heavenly man realm in such a short time? What kind of progress is this? Isn't it too fast? It seems that I have never seen such a fast progress. However, he didn't know that this wasn't the manifestation of Tan Tan's real strength. Instead, it was because the Demon King's soul had awakened. The Demon King's soul was several grades higher than Tan Tan's body. Tan Tan had been constantly improving recently because he had obtained a large number of spirit beast cores. So, the Demon King's soul had also improved along with him. The degree of improvement wasn't inferior to Tan Tan's. Moreover, the most intense battle was the best way to digest the spirit beast cores. Therefore, the Demon King was able to control Tan Tan's body more smoothly and incisively. In addition, the Calamity Soul was able to adapt very well to the special geographical environment in front of him. But, the Demon King Tan Tan seemed to be able to operate more smoothly in such an environment. In fact, the Demon King's strength hadn't been fully displayed yet. It was limited by the endurance limit of Tan Tan's body. So, he would have been able to display an even more terrifying power if he hadn't had any misgivings about this. However, Tan Tan's body was in a cycle of gradual improvement and strengthening in this specific environment. His body wouldn't be consumed with every enemy he killed. Instead, it would become stronger. So, he could further display the true power of the Demon King. Chu Yang was following behind these two people. However, the pressure he felt wasn't as big as he had imagined. In fact, he felt that the pressure hadn't increased but had instead decreased after a while. In fact, it had decreased by a lot. Neither side shouted. They were only fighting in silence. This could be considered as a tacit understanding between the two sides. The reason for this was very simple. They would know where they were if they spoke. However, the enemy would also know where they were. So, such a move was tantamount to courting death in such a battle. No one knew how many people had died on the other side. They also didn't know how many of their comrades were left. At most, they could only tell from the screams of those who died. Well, if so and so died, then so and so died. As for those who died silently, the others didn't know at all. Meng Wuya stood on top of the battle. His field of vision seemed to be vast. However, he couldn't see anything in this special environment. He couldn't differentiate between friend and foe. Now, it was impossible for him to launch an indiscriminate attack from the sky. It would definitely cause casualties on his side. Moreover, it would be a large number of casualties. Other than the fact that he had more people on his side, the other side had two saints to protect them. On his side, none of the people that Yu Lai had sent had high-end strength. His only advantage now was that he had more people on his side. At least, he could still afford to consume them. Meng Wuya gritted his teeth. He just kept urging and adding fuel to the fire. Blood Demon Squad, Imperial Guards, follow the established strategy. Go up one by one. Those at the front, rush over directly. Don't worry about anything else. Go all out and rush to the front. Those at the back, continue to rush. However, in this process, Meng Wuya didn't use his Dream Slayer army. Previously, he did not complete the mission. Together with the Dream Slayer army, he was already a scapegoat. Moreover, this time, delayed rain had brought people here. No matter what, even if they completed the mission, it was delayed rain's credit that would be redeemed. Since that was the case, why should he let his men suffer meaningless casualties? Meng Wuya really didn't want to experience Chu Yang's terrifying potential for a counterattack a second time. Under Meng Wuya's command, team after team entered the passage in a single file. They jumped out from their hiding places and joined the extremely dark, chaotic battle, adding fuel to the fire. Yes, it was adding fuel to the fire. Moreover, it was adding fuel to the fire continuously. They didn't know whether it was their own fire that burned the enemy to death, or the enemy's fire that burned them to death. Divine Spirit of Calamity. Damn Divine Spirit of Calamity. Meng Wuya sighed deeply. It was the damn Divine Spirit of Calamity that had completely overturned the comparison of strength between the two sides. It had completely broken the deadlock of the other side. In such a specific environment, the Divine Spirit of Calamity had an overwhelming advantage. Meng Wuya asked himself, even if he were to fight the Divine Spirit of Calamity head-on in such an environment, he would definitely die. Chapter 2150. Meng Wuya clearly misunderstood the strength of the Calamity Spirit. As long as the Calamity Spirit was constantly nourished by the Chi of Death, its strength had reached the level of a sage, and no one could pose a threat to the Calamity Spirit. Under such circumstances, the Calamity Spirit was a perpetual fighter. Moreover, it was the kind of fighter that would become stronger the longer the battle lasted. This was definitely not a myth, but a reality. The Tribulation Spirit seemed to be fighting tirelessly. Chu Yang was next to it. Tan Tan's body had been strengthened unceasingly. But, it still had its limits. So, Tan Tan eventually got tired. So, Chu Yang naturally took his place after Tan Tan withdrew. And, Chu Yang waited until Chu Yang couldn't bear it anymore. However, Tan Tan had recovered a little, and had taken his place again. The two of them took turns to fight. So far, they had already fought 3 or 4 times. Now, they didn't even know the cultivation level of the person who had died in their hands. They only knew how to fight, and fight, and fight without stopping. Fighting had become an instinct at this moment. Meng Chao Ran would have been relieved if he had seen Chu Yang and Tan Tan's performance. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that his 2 younger brothers had actually grown to such an extent. Along the way, the number of saint-level experts who died at the hands of these two was no less than 1,000. As for the super-experts of the celestial realm, there were also 7 or 8 who had fallen. The Tribulation Swordmaster and the Devil King had joined hands to display such a shocking power. However, Chu Yang and Tan Tan also understood that it was thanks to the divine soul of the Tribulation that they had won this battle. After all, Chu Yang and Tan Tan would have died countless times by now if it hadn't been for the divine soul of the Tribulation. The Tribulation Spirit's current achievements were much worse than the sum of Chu Yang and Tan Tan's. Chu Yang and Tan Tan's fighting prowess wasn't bad. However, they couldn't pose too much of a threat to celestial-level experts. However, celestial-level experts and sage-level experts were almost the same for the Tribulation Spirit. They could be finished off in one move. Therefore, the casualties it had caused were at least several times more than the sum of Chu Yang and Tan Tan. The opponent's attacks were still like the rising tide of the sea. One wave after another, and each wave was higher than the previous one. It seemed as if there was no end to it. Chu Yang and Tan Tan still remembered how many people they had killed in the beginning. However, they didn't even count later. The entire canyon was now filled with the smell of blood because the bloody light was also covered by the endless darkness. There seemed to be a cool breeze blowing from the front. The spirits of Chu Yang and Tan Tan were shaken. However, their complexions became even more serious. This cool breeze woke up the two of them from their intense battle. At the same time, it also brought about another fact: the terrain in front of them was completely open. In such a completely open terrain, it was bound to be even more disadvantageous for them to continue fighting. Moreover, there was the danger of falling into enemy encirclement. In front of them, a whistling sound could be heard. Clearly, a new wave of enemies was about to arrive. No, this isn't a simple open land. It's the kind of terrain that has obstructions. It can even be regarded as a relatively complex terrain. Chu Yang's mind stirred. He carefully felt the wind blowing on his body, and suddenly became startled. Tan Tan had already taken 3 steps forward. But, he turned around as soon as he heard these words. What? What did you say? I'm saying that there should be a place for us to hide. The corners of Chu Yang's mouth twitched. Then, he made a big decision. So far, the battle had lasted for half a night. He didn't carefully count how many enemies he had dealt with. However, Chu Yang was sure of one thing: the enemies he had fought with definitely didn't exceed 5,000 people. This number wasn't negligible compared to the total strength of the enemy. But, it was still within the range that the enemy could bear. If the battle continued like this, the terrain would become more and more open according to the route forward. So, they would have to endure at least 1,000 more waves of battles if 50 people were to come at once. In that case, the divine soul of the calamity wouldn't be able to destroy the enemies. However, the other people on his side would still fall into a situation where they would be exhausted to death. Therefore, he could only take a risk. Divine soul! Chu Yang shouted. Here! The divine soul of the calamity floated back. Scatter your soul body immediately and look for a place to hide. Chu Yang hurriedly said. Yes. The divine soul of the calamity immediately turned around and scattered his own divine soul. He used all his strength to search for the place that Chu Yang needed. Not far ahead on the right. There's a mountain wall there. There's another open land behind the mountain wall. However, there are a lot of miscellaneous rocks there. If you're not careful, you'll bump into them. The divine soul of the calamity quickly searched and immediately reported the information that he had gathered. At this time, the whistling sound in front of them had arrived. The enemies had come again. Everyone, stop moving forward for the time being. After we've dealt with this batch of enemies, we'll immediately go in and hide there. Chu Yang hurriedly said, Divine soul, you must hold on. I'll need you to lead the way later. Don't worry, I'll be fine. As long as you're fine, I'll definitely be fine. Ha! The divine soul of the calamity laughed proudly. He had killed to his heart's content this time. If it weren't for Chu Yang and the others, he really wanted to just jump into the sea of enemies. Only hurting people, not fearing being hurt, and continuing to fight endlessly. This feeling was really wonderful. Feeling the last enemy pass by, Chu Yang didn't hesitate. When there were still sounds of fighting behind them, he hurriedly shouted, Everyone, let's start. The divine soul of the calamity took the lead and rushed to the right. Chu Yang hurriedly gave instructions on the way forward. Everyone followed in a line. After fighting for such a long time, although there were 3 experts at the front, the number of enemies that managed to slip through still accounted for more than a third of the total number of people. Although most of these people were injured, and everyone had joined forces to attack, after fighting for such a long time, everyone was basically covered in cuts and bruises, and it was difficult for them to continue. They were already exhausted. They were just barely holding on with one breath. Even the 2 saints Hu and Ma were panting and almost collapsed, not to mention by Yu Chen and the others. Everyone carefully followed Chu Yang, and Chu Yang followed the divine tribulation spirit, a new and experienced horse that knew the way. They walked forward about 7 feet to the right, and found a relatively narrow, cave-like place. Everyone carefully squeezed in, and sure enough, there was an open space behind. Although there were a lot of stone-like things lying around, there was finally a temporary place to rest. Because right in front, there was a stone wall that looked like a screen. An ordinary person's search would definitely not lead them to this place. If they could see it, hiding here would only be a joke. They would be able to see it at a glance. However, in this special place where there was no light at all, nothing could be seen. Even the detection of spiritual sense could not be used. This hiding place became an excellent place to take refuge. Now that they could finally rest, everyone heaved a huge sigh of relief, both physically and mentally. They used the little bit of cultivation they had left to cover the smell of blood on their bodies. Only then did they have time to treat their wounds. When Yarrow Ningning and Bai Shixian, who were the last to come in, were treating their wounds, they heard a noise outside. A large group of people came from afar and rushed over like a gust of wind. Someone said, "Hey! Why is there no movement?" Another person said, "Are they all dead?" That's not very likely. Even if the other party doesn't count as a soul calamity, there are still 2 other saint-level powerhouses. Even if they're not strong enough, they still have the ability to break through, someone else said. Everyone, search ahead. Be careful. If it doesn't work, we will directly leave the valley. In such an environment, searching is meaningless, a calm voice said. Okay. A group of people whizzed away. They entered the path that Chu Yang and the others came from. It was the area where Chu Le had used a strong poison. Chu Yang couldn't help but say, "Have a safe journey." The others also sighed. Everyone had seen the poison on that path. It was because of Chu Le's poison that the enemies were poisoned when they rushed past Chu Yang and the others. Those below the heavenly human level would directly fall to the ground. Those above the heavenly human level would also have their fighting power continuously reduced. It was difficult for them to do anything. That was why they could survive until now. A poison that could be fatal in the blink of an eye was truly frightening to the extreme. How domineering was such a poison? And now, this group of people actually wanted to take the initiative to rush over. Wanting to reach the other end safely was simply a joke. Everyone knew that within a few breaths' time, this group of people who had just entered would all fall to the ground and slowly turn into corpses. There was no way they could pass through this valley. However, a few breaths' time was enough for them to run a long distance. To the people hiding here, it posed no threat at all. Everyone was still treating their wounds gently. Healing their injuries and recovering their fighting power were the most important things now. Then, they heard teams of experts whizzing past outside one after another. In less than half an hour, 2 teams had already passed by, and the 3rd team was approaching. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Slowly, an entire 2 hours passed. In the first hour, they heard whizzing sounds coming and going almost continuously. They didn't know how many people had passed by. Just like that, they bumped into the ambush of Chu Le's poison. It was only after an hour that it gradually quieted down. They didn't see any more groups of people coming over. Chapter 2151. Today was Thanksgiving Day. I didn't know it at first, but when I saw the discussion in the group and saw the word gratitude, I was touched. Or perhaps, I was the one who should be grateful. I used to be a lowly person. Back then, I was as poor as a church mouse. But, my brothers and sisters saved me from hardship and gave me a piece of blue sky. You allowed me to realize my value and earn a living. I wanted a scoop of water, but you gave me a spring. Thank you. I couldn't forget the time when Lingtian Legend had just started. I stared at the bookstore and the comments section. At that time, the comments section was barren. Later on, I begged in my book, "Everyone, please comment. Let me know if I wrote well or not." I was at my wit's end. At that time, there were a few people who made me feel warm when I thought of them. One was called Aren. I didn't know if he was a man or a woman. I didn't have any contact with him, but he was the first person to appear in the group. There was another, Chan Lin Whispers. We discussed it many times in the comments section. There was another, called Blazing Ice Love. When the comments section was empty, he left a comment and pointed out the shortcomings. Yes, there was also Southwest 1 Star. His post is still pinned at the top of the comments section. Later on, there were more and more readers and there was a group. At that time, there were dozens of people chatting in the group. In terms of age, I was ranked 2nd, so they all called me second brother. That was an unforgettable time. First Court King Qingguang had been with me since Lingtian Legend. When old friends were together, they chatted casually. If they wanted to say something, they would say it. If they didn't write well, they would say it in person. That was the beginning of Lingtian. When it came to Evil Monarch, there were more people. Unforgettable ones were Imprint, Polar Light, Summer, arrogant killer, Wui, Meng Yi, Qianshuan, Meng Ruo. Standing under a tree as a punishment. Demon Blade, 14th brother, you don't understand. Those were a bunch of old friends who helped me without any complaints. It could be said that the current Soaring Wind, our group, had so many good brothers and sisters silently contributing. Most of the brothers and sisters just quietly read, voted, and subscribed. There were so many that I didn't even know their names. But I will always remember you and be grateful to you. Without you guys, how could there be wind dominating the world? There was once a brother who came to drink with me. He was on a business trip and was passing by Lai Wu. He thought of me and came over. While drinking, he asked me, "Second brother, it's been so many years, but you still remember the words I scolded you. Your memory is too good." I smiled. He could still remember many of the chat records from back then. How could he not remember? And now, our proud world brothers and sisters, it was you who stood by our side through the wind and rain. It was you who silently contributed. It was you who created Wind Dominates the World. Created the world-defying stage. Also, all these years, my brothers and sisters in Tiebar had been working hard to maintain my popularity and protect me. Every little bit of it had been witnessed by me. Back then, Goldie, Nangong, Yu Luo, Big Fei, and now, Little Black, Little Yi, and the others, everyone had paid a great price. To be honest, there were times when I really regretted it. For the sake of subscriptions, I had quarreled and fought. I also hurt feelings. Please forgive me, I was still a small author at that time. It's the pressure of life. I don't want to be poor anymore. And one more subscription means one more income. Sigh. My temper is too straightforward. If there's anything uncomfortable, I want to say it. I don't think about the consequences. Of course, this bad temper made me offend many people, but I also made some friends because of it. Brothers and sisters, I just want to say, without you guys, there would be no wind dominating the world. Without you guys, there would be no legend of Ling Tian. Without you guys, there would be no evil monarch. Without you guys, there would be no world-defying stage. Thanksgiving Day, today I am deeply grateful. I am grateful to the heavens for letting me have your support. I am grateful to all of you for letting me have so much. Thank you, my dear brothers and sisters. The past will be the past. But I hope that on the road in the future, there will be me and you. No matter where we are. No matter how I offended you in the past, please forgive me. I hope that on the road in the future, we will not have any more disputes and hurt each other. The book I wrote is not the best. There are all kinds of flaws. I am trying my best to correct them. Here, I also thank all of you for tolerating me for so many years. Thank you so much. I remember that when I finished writing a book, I still didn't know how to use the ellipsis. Until now, the ellipsis in the first 10 chapters of Ling Tian Legend and Evil Monarch this was taught to me by a book friend. He was very sensitive. After reading 2 books, he felt that this author doesn't even know how to use the ellipsis, right? It was a brother called I Am a Madman from Tiebar. It should be this name. I can't remember it clearly after 3 years. Don't take offense if I remember wrongly. For this matter, he specially entered the group and told me how to type the ellipsis. Then, he floated away. The problem with the idiom, I remember that I never knew how to use the idiom recklessly wasting natural resources. In the past, it was always recklessly wasting natural resources. It was also because the modest brother couldn't stand it anymore and entered the group to guide me. I remember the first sentence very clearly. You don't even know how to use the idiom, yet you still want to write a book. Cough. Okay, I changed it. But brother, where are you? Don't say any more, it's already over 1,000 words. Really, if I really talk about these things, 10,000 words won't be enough. I just want to say, thank you all. Life is about gratitude. Thank you everyone. I will work even harder to give you a better story. Perhaps this is the only way I can repay you all. I wish you all happiness. No matter when, please remember that here, there is a friend, a brother. His name is Wind Conquers the World. No matter where you are, he will sincerely bless you. A life of peace and happiness. Chapter 2152. Furthermore, although Le had recently obtained the Poison King's legacy and her poison skills had improved greatly, it was still a short time ago. There was still an upper limit to the absolute level of poison. As long as it reached the level of a heavenly being or above, although it could still cause gradual weakening and even eventual death, as long as the other party was not stupid, they would still be able to escape after being poisoned and weakened. At least in Chu Yang's heart, although he also believed that Le's poison array could cause considerable damage, it should not have such exaggerated effects. Le, what kind of poison did you use? Chu Yang asked Chu Le, very puzzled. Chu Le leaned weakly on his shoulder and said, I used a chain of 3 poisons this time, including the innate poison, the origin poison, and the heavenly softening poison. Chu Yang rolled his eyes. So that was it. He was also very familiar with the poison scripture. The Poison King's legacy was first placed in his mind before being passed to Le. When he heard Chu Le mention these 3 poisons, he immediately understood why no one had warned them. This girl was really too crafty. Her scheming in using poison was really at an unimaginable level. Of course, this also explained why Chu Le was so weak now. The innate poison was the poison that Chu Le used the most frequently. It could be considered a type of poison in the world. As for the origin poison, it was a step further than the innate poison that Chu Le originally used. It was the most powerful poison derived from the cultivation of a complete poison technique. There was a clear explanation in the Poison King's legacy. No one below the saint level could cure this poison. In other words, if one did not have the cultivation of a saint, one could only wait for death. Even if one was at the peak of a heavenly being and could rely on one's own cultivation to survive, there was no cure for this poison. It would gradually deplete one's energy, and one would still die in the end. As for the heavenly softening poison, in terms of its poison power, it was not considered top-notch. In fact, it was not even fatal. However, it had an extremely special characteristic. Even if a saint was poisoned by this poison, his mouth and tongue would be paralyzed for a certain period of time. He would not be able to say a single word or even make a single sound. This was the heavenly softening poison. Even the heavens would go limp after being poisoned by this poison, let alone humans. This was the best explanation for the heavenly softening poison. Unfortunately, this kind of poison can't stay for long. After a period of time, it will automatically decompose and return to the world. Chu Le stuck out her tongue. Otherwise, it might not be difficult to create a real Yama's gorge here. Chu Yang smiled bitterly and said, Little girl, do you still think that your abilities are too small? So many of us have been bathed in blood, and our bodies are covered with cuts and bruises. We can't even compare to the number of people you've killed with your poison alone, and you're still not satisfied. Triple poison chain. What a good move. What a scheme. What a good move. Chu Le's pretty face stiffened. Brother, are you praising me or scolding me? Chu Yang's heart ached as he hugged the weak Le tightly. It's definitely a compliment, the most sincere compliment. I'm afraid that more than a third of the enemies we have to face will be buried by your young lady's hands. Although it was just as Chu Yang had said, the continuous use of so many innate poisons and natal poisons was a huge burden to Chu Le, and it was a great loss. Chu Le didn't participate in any battles, but she was so weak now precisely because of this. With this buffer, everyone's injuries slowly recovered. The land of extreme darkness was completely silent. However, in this land of extreme tranquility, Chu Yang's heart was inexplicably moved, and the desire from before became even stronger at this moment. Tan Tan, who was beside Chu Yang, also seemed to be somewhat impatient. How is it? Chu Yang asked quietly. It feels very close, and it's getting more and more real. Tan Tan took a breath, and there was a yearning in his voice. I want to go over and take a look. Yes, the situation is temporarily stable now. You can go and take a look. Chu Yang suppressed the yearning in his heart. If the two of them only sensed the same opportunity, Chu Yang didn't want to interfere, and would rather help Tan Tan. Compared to brothers, what was a mere opportunity? Yes, where is your sense? Tan Tan said, mine is in the southwest. Chu Yang was startled. He said, Mine is in the southeast. Tan Tan was also startled. Then, he said, what did you sense? Chu Yang didn't want to monopolize it, and neither did Tan Tan. When he heard Chu Yang say that it was in the southeast, Tan Tan felt as if Chu Yang was helping him. However, he was clearly prepared to give it to Chu Yang in his heart. Just as Chu Yang had thought, a mere opportunity was nothing compared to a brother. This was also what Tan Tan was thinking. To be honest, what I sensed is very strange, very strange. Chu Yang sensed Tan Tan's thoughts as soon as he heard this. He couldn't help but feel a burst of warmth in his heart. He said, I sense that I was getting rid of something, but I don't know what it is that I'm getting rid of. As you said just now, that feeling is getting more and more real, but it can't be described in words. Tan Tan sighed and said, it's not the same. I can conclude that what we sensed is absolutely not the same thing. What I sensed is a kind of powerful reality. It seems to be telling me that I can become unprecedentedly powerful as long as I can find him. Chu Yang also felt relieved. So, that's the best. Why don't you go quickly? I go. Why don't you go? Tan Tan rolled his eyes. Chu Yang smiled warmly. He stretched out his hand in the darkness, and rubbed Tan Tan's head. I also sensed it. It's indeed not the same. I assure you. Tan Tan suspiciously said, then, let's go together. You go to the east, and I go to the west. Chu Yang thought for a moment. Tan Tan won't feel relieved if I don't go. Moreover, Chu Yang also sensed that these two brothers have encountered two different opportunities. So, why shouldn't I take the heaven's gift? All right. Chu Yang readily agreed. These two martial brothers were in an extremely dark place. They clearly knew that the other party couldn't see them. However, they still looked at each other and smiled. Who would give up the opportunity to reach the peak for me? But, there are only two of us now. I can do it for my brother. I can also do it for my brother. Chu Yang solemnly instructed everyone not to act rashly. The current situation was very clear. So, it was better to stay still than to act. Then, both of them got up at the same time, and rushed towards some kind of power that was calling them. Chu Yang had left the tribulation divine spirit behind to guard everyone. It was certain that there wasn't any danger for the time being. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. The ones who could stabilize the morale of the troops were him, Tan Tan, and the tribulation divine spirit. Moreover, the tribulation divine spirit was the strongest among them. If the tribulation divine spirit wasn't there when the two of them left, and a new enemy suddenly appeared, it would be extremely bad. The relaxed smiles on Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma's faces turned grave when they learned that Chu Yang and Tan Tan had left for some reason. The two of them supported Yarrow Ningning, who was on the verge of collapse because of severe physical exhaustion. Then, they said in an extremely solemn tone, Your Highness, your humble subordinates have two words of advice. They are also words from the bottom of my heart. I want to report them to your Highness. I hope that your Highness can remember them, and don't neglect them. Yarrow Ningning said weakly, You can speak. I'm listening. Uncle Ma took a deep breath and said, Your Highness, no matter when, where, or under any circumstances, you must never become enemies with these two people. Yarrow Ningning grunted and said, You're talking nonsense. We're brothers. How can we be enemies? I'm about to die from exhaustion. You still have the time and mood to talk nonsense with me. Uncle Hu smiled somewhat speechlessly and said, Your Highness is right. Your subordinate is indeed talking nonsense. He thought that perhaps this was His Highness the Great Master's fortune. With his stupidity, he had made friends with these two powerful brothers for no reason. Moreover, he had also made friends with these two people. In the future, even if the Demon Empress was no longer here and the Great Master was in charge of the Demon Emperor Heaven, Yarrow Ningning's position would be as stable as a mountain and unshakable as long as these two people were still here. The affairs of the world were unpredictable and hard to describe. If the Great Master had a little bit of the aura of a royal family, or if he had a little bit of arrogance due to his status, and if he hadn't been so submissive, he probably wouldn't have been recognized by these two people. In that case, the Great Master wasn't completely useless. Humans were indeed simple and naive. This was the best. Luck and destiny were indeed innate. It was difficult for ordinary people to obtain, possess, and enjoy. It was just that, at the current stage, was it really good to be brothers with these two people? If he wasn't careful, he would be dragged into a bottomless abyss and endless trouble. Yarrow Ningning asked excitedly, "What you're saying isn't all nonsense. According to what you're saying, it can at least prove that these two brothers of mine are very powerful, right? Isn't it?" His eyes were already shining. "It's not just very powerful." Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma looked at each other and smiled bitterly. These two men, one seems steady and calm, the other absurd, but they both have the air of a leader and a leader. They're definitely not simple people. Uncle Hu sighed a little. "It's a pity that such talents aren't from our demon race." This time, it was Yarrow Ningning's turn to be a little dumbfounded. "Why don't I see any bearing of a leader? I only feel that they're very impressive," she thought. "Aren't the two uncles' evaluation of Chu Yang and Tan Tan a little too high?" Successful superiors were all amazing, but amazing people were not necessarily qualified to be superiors. Chapter 2153. I'm afraid that even the two of us might not be able to make it through that stretch of road just now. However, even though the two of them were at the front of the most dangerous part of the road and the pressure was heavier than ours, they still managed to make it through. Their cultivation is far inferior to ours, but they managed to do what we couldn't. From the series of subtle sounds just now, we judged that they were treating the wounds on their bodies. It's just that we heard different places. There are at least a dozen wounds on Chu Yang's body. There are about 80 wounds on Tan Tan's body. As for the other people, there are no more than 30 wounds at most. Not to mention that these wounds were made by experts. Even if they were ordinary flesh wounds, it's definitely not something that an ordinary expert can bear. The so-called wounds all over the body are easy to say, but how many people have really experienced such wounds all over their bodies? However, they can do this for their subordinates. This is the bearing of a leader. It's definitely not something that an ordinary leader can do. Uncle Ma concluded, who wouldn't do their best to work under such a boss? This is the most frightening thing. Yes, there's also their development potential. Uncle Hu smiled bitterly. After thinking for a long time, he said, rapid progress. Given time, Chu Yang, Tan Tan, and their subordinates will definitely become a new force that will shake the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Uncle Ma gave a shocking conclusion. Uncle Hu nodded in agreement. The two youngsters, who seemed to be less than 20 years old, were already comparable to senior experts who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years. Under such circumstances, they were still able to maintain an astonishing advancement of 1,000 miles a day. This could no longer be described as frightening. It was terrifying. Using these two as opponents was simply a nightmare. Once these two people become powerful, Mo Yuntian, Yuan Tianji, this time, I'm afraid that he has really poked a hornet's nest. Moreover, it's the kind of super poisonous hornet that can poison people and saints to death. Uncle Hu said with emotion. Yarrow Ningning raised her eyebrows and said, "Isn't it a little early to be emotional now?" According to them, there are also brothers who are not inferior to them in terms of progress. There are as many as 5 of them. Why do all the brothers have to be like this? Uncle Ma smiled bitterly. Just these two are enough to make Yuan Tianjie unable to eat or sleep in peace. Tan Tan had been relying on his intuition the whole way forward. The sword in his hand had become a blind bamboo in his blind hand, a tool that guided him in the right direction. Relying on his heart's unusually solid senses, he brazenly advanced towards the place of infinite temptation. His heart slowly began to stir. This was definitely a great opportunity for him. He could clearly feel this. In his consciousness, the two source souls were talking like old friends. This kind of conversation had already been carried out countless times. After countless conversations, the two source souls had already gotten used to this kind of situation. If there really came a day where one of them was no longer around, then the other one would feel very uncomfortable. There was a man standing upright in Tan Tan's sea of consciousness. He was dressed in black clothes. His long hair hung down from his shoulders. His hands were clasped behind his back. He looked like a monarch who was overlooking the world. He had a graceful bearing. It seemed as if he was the only person in the world. In front of him was Tan Tan and Chu Yang's clown junior brother. He was sitting there cross-legged. He had an indifferent look on his face as he giggled. I was born, and I was destroyed. I was destroyed, and I was born. But in the end, two source souls were born. One body accommodates two source souls. And, I can talk to my own self after tens of thousands of years. This kind of opportunity can be regarded as unique and unprecedented, the Devil King Source Soul softly sighed. Tan Tan indifferently smiled and said, yes, yes. Not bad, not bad. I also feel very strange. You are me, and I am you. But, we are clearly two different people. Ha ha ha, this kind of situation is really interesting. The Devil King Source Soul also chuckled when he heard this. Tan Tan solemnly said, but, I still want to thank you. My progress wouldn't have been so fast if you hadn't taught me wholeheartedly during this time. The Devil King Source Soul faintly smiled and shook his head. You are me, and I am you. Helping others is helping oneself. There's no need to be polite. Tan Tan laughed. This conversation is very likely to be the last one between you and me. The Devil King Source Soul was somewhat disappointed. He crossed his hands behind his back and looked at Tan Tan. His eyes emitted a strong emotion. Why? Tan Tan was somewhat reluctant. We can continue like this. I don't want to disappear, and you don't have to disappear. We can still talk to each other when we are lonely. Isn't this beautiful? The Devil King Source Soul stagnated. Your thinking is really different from others. Ha ha ha. At this time, you are actually thinking about the problem of whether you are willing to part or not. You are not worried about your own safety, Tan Tan blankly said. Worried? Why should I worry? What is there to worry about? The Devil King Source Soul warmly smiled. There was a bit of envy in his smile as he said, perhaps, this pure sincerity is what you can rely on in the future. Tan Tan, the current you is something that the previous me would never have been able to have. Pure sincerity was something that I had pursued for a long time, but could never obtain. Now, the other me has obtained it. I have it, but... The Devil King Source Soul looked up to the sky and sighed. Tan Tan blankly looked at him. He suddenly felt that the Devil King Source Soul's desire to leave was very strong. He couldn't help but beg, I say, don't disappear, okay? Get rid of this thought of yours. I really don't want you to leave. You also said that you are me, and I am you. What's wrong with having two souls in one body? I think it's very good. The Devil King Source Soul looked at him with interest and said, you don't want me to leave? It's not impossible for me to not disappear. If I don't disappear, you must disappear. If you don't mind, I will be very grateful to you. No, 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 I mind very much. I mind very much. I say, isn't there a way to kill two birds with one stone and get the best of both worlds? Isn't it good for us to exist together? Tan Tan pulled his hair in distress. Why must one of us disappear? I don't know if you will miss me if I disappear. In any case, I will be very unhappy if I can't see you in the future. Silly child. The Devil King Source Soul sighed. This body can only be controlled by one soul. If two souls exist in one body, no matter how their minds merge, they will always restrict each other. This will cause the body to be unable to increase its power to the limit. Then, it will forever be unable to peek into the Great Tao, and will forever be unable to set foot on the peak. This is a choice. Right now, I can already feel that the Great Tao imprint is somewhere in front of us. If you and I coexist in one body, the moment we face the Great Tao imprint, both of us will be destroyed. It will never obey two masters to obtain it at the same time. The Great Tao is ruthless. It will only belong to one soul. The Devil King Source Soul faintly smiled. This is the selfishness of the heart. But sometimes, selfishness isn't necessarily a bad thing. Especially selfishness towards oneself. Only selfishness can lead one to bravely move forward. Tan Tan was at a loss. He truly didn't understand what the Devil King Source Soul was saying. This body has always been controlled by you. You have always been in control of it for so many years. Don't think that I haven't thought of snatching it away in such a long time. The fact is that I can't snatch it away. Don't think that I'm so kind. Perhaps your soul would have dispersed long ago if I could have done it. And you would have been annihilated countless times already. The Devil King Source Soul forced a smile. Tan Tan opened his eyes wide. He hadn't expected that this other self would have wanted to seize the complete control of this body. In fact, he had wanted to annihilate himself for eternity. He had been completely unprepared. Tan Tan, I want you to promise me 3 things. The Devil King Source Soul stood tall and straight. His black robe suddenly fluttered. His face that had never been revealed had become even more blurred at this moment. Why do you need to do this? Can't we just not take that great Tao imprint? You and I can still coexist like this. Tan Tan suddenly said. What? What did you say? The Devil King Source Soul was genuinely shocked by this statement. What kind of person is this? This is obviously a matter of great benefit to him. So, how can he change his mind in such an impossible direction? I have to sacrifice you if I want to obtain that great Tao imprint. I don't think it's worth it, Tan Tan said. Do you know what great Tao imprint is? Do you know how difficult it is to obtain such an opportunity? You're giving up just like that. You don't have the heart of a child. You're simply stupid. The Devil King Source Soul couldn't bear it any longer. He roared. I really don't know what great Tao imprint is. But I don't care what it is. In any case, I don't think it's worth it to sacrifice you for it. It's not worth it, Tan Tan said. I'm telling the truth. We're getting along well. You don't have the strength to take away the control of this body. I don't mind your existence. In fact, I like you. So, why should I make you disappear for some great Tao imprint? It's better to give up and go back, Tan Tan said indifferently. No. You have to listen to me on this matter. Do you hear me? The Devil King Source Soul shouted himself hoarse. Why are you so stubborn? I'm willing to give up that great Tao imprint. So, why don't you understand? You will disappear. Tan Tan was extremely distressed. The Devil King Source Soul was speechless for a long time. He firmly stared at Tan Tan. His eyes were filled with boundless excitement. The great Tao imprint. How many people had dreamt of it since ancient times? How many people had wished for it? Chapter 2154. How many people would kill each other if they had this opportunity? They wouldn't even frown. No one had ever given up such an opportunity for someone else. But Tan Tan had given it up for him today. With an indescribable excitement, the Demon King's Source Soul couldn't help feeling a surge of emotions. It's too late. Now that we're here, we can't go back. The Demon King's Source Soul chuckled. Tan Tan, being able to help you is the greatest fortune of my life. Tan Tan tried to turn around and walk back. He found that he couldn't take a single step. He could only walk forward. He couldn't move in any other direction. Tan Tan struggled with all his might. But he still couldn't move. He suddenly felt disappointed and frustrated. His eyes couldn't help but turn red. What should I do? The Demon King Source Soul smiled warmly. The opportunity has arrived. What's yours is yours. You can't refuse it. Tan Tan, don't forget my request. I want you to promise me 3 things. What things? Tan Tan instinctively felt sad. So, he asked. The first thing is that you must reach the peak. This peak is something that our divine race, or rather, the devil race has never reached. It's the ultimate domain that no one has ever reached before. The second thing is, you must always maintain this pure and innocent heart. For the rest of my life, this is what I wish for. I hope that my other self can maintain this state of mind forever. The third thing is my unreasonable request. The Demon King Source Soul faintly smiled. He hesitated for a moment. Then, he said, you and Xiedan Feng will get married in the future. And, your first child will be called Tan Xiao. Tan Tan said somewhat anxiously, There's no problem with these. The first thing is a bit difficult. I will try my best to achieve it. But I can't do anything if I can't. The Demon King Source Soul chuckled, it's no matter. Besides, you have your brother by your side. He will do his best to help you. Why do you need me? He reluctantly looked at Tan Tan and said, Tan Tan, goodbye to my other self. I can feel that this place isn't far from the end. Go and collect the biggest opportunity of your life. Tan Tan felt dizzy. Then, his consciousness returned to his body. He was surprised to find that his body had already arrived in a place that was even darker than before. In fact, it was so dark that there wasn't even any air in this place. When he was talking to the Demon King Source Soul, his body followed the voice in his heart, but he didn't realize that he had unknowingly arrived in this strange place. Right in front of him, there was a black bead that was constantly emitting circles of dark ripples. The Demon King Source Spirit's voice sounded in the darkness again. This is the origin bead formed by the universe's origin, controlling all darkness. Tan Tan stepped forward and received him. This is a special thing that can only be formed by the great Tao of heaven and earth. No one, no matter how high their cultivation is, can create such a strange thing. This is the true creation of heaven and earth. It's a truly unparalleled opportunity. The Demon King Source Spirit gave a soft laugh, but this laugh was filled with an indescribable bitterness. Only Tan Tan can obtain that essence bead. I absolutely can't obtain it. Bare sincerity. Tan Tan's gaze was instantly attracted by the dark bead. He couldn't help but walk over step by step. If there were outsiders here, they would only see darkness in front of them. They wouldn't be able to see the bead. However, Tan Tan clearly saw it. Moreover, it was so clear. After taking 7 steps, the bead was already within his reach. From afar, it looked like a goose egg-sized bead. However, when he got closer, the bead was only the size of a rice grain. It was surrounded by a dense black gas. Tan Tan Zhong reached out, but then retracted his hand. He understood that if he took it, the Demon King Source Spirit would probably disappear. Unwilling. Extremely unwilling. The Demon King Source Spirit roared in his consciousness, take it. Tan Tan felt his head explode with a burst of dizziness. He couldn't help reaching out to grab it. The next moment, a wisp of black gas spread out from the bead, and quickly climbed up Tan Tan's palm. Then, it followed the meridians in his arm, and quickly entered his body. It went deep into Tan Tan's consciousness. In his sea of consciousness, the Demon King Source Spirit calmly watched the black gas enter. Its eyes were shining with a blazing light. This is my dream. This is the ultimate Leduo that I once dreamed of, but never had the chance to see. After the black gas entered, it seemed to sense the existence of the Demon King Source Spirit. Suddenly, it turned into a sharp blade. Dense murderous aura. The Demon King Source Spirit bitterly smiled. Sure enough, I'm destined to disappear. That black gas turned into a blade and chopped down. The blade cut through all illusions in the world. It cut through all illusions. The Demon King Source Spirit chuckled and said, although I'm destined to disappear, I won't be killed. I won't be killed by the blade of the great Tao. That would be harmful to my present life. His body floated, and he dodged the blade. Then, he silently said, my present life, my past life, I'll say goodbye forever. He closed his eyes. Then, his 2 legs suddenly dissipated, and turned into black gas. They entered the black gas that he had just entered, and were quickly assimilated. Then, it was his body, arms, and hair. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. It seemed as if he was completely indifferent to his body dissipating, and no longer existed. The assimilation speed of the black gas became faster and faster. Gradually, his face was revealed. It was a handsome face. It was so dignified that it could make people suffocate. But this face only appeared for a moment. Then, it turned into black gas. Perhaps, the word Tan in Tan Tan's name meant this. The Demon King Source Spirit finally disappeared. It disappeared from the 3 realms and the 5 elements. It didn't matter how world-shaking he was when he was alive, or how unhindered he was in the world. But, when he died, He was filled with peace and serenity. His life's cultivation had turned into the purest devil energy. It hovered in Tantan's sea of consciousness, and then embedded itself in Tantan's flesh, blood, bones, and meridians. He had found his rightful place. Tantan suddenly felt a tearing pain in his heart. His consciousness immediately entered his sea of consciousness. But he only saw two eyes looking at him. They were filled with hope and calmness. It seemed as if they were saying to him, "Goodbye, Tantan, my life." Tantan suddenly burst into tears. He then shouted, "So, it's you. So, it's because you're so handsome, bastard. That's why I'm so narcissistic. Don't go, ah. Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo." The Demon King's source spirit had already disappeared. So, it naturally wouldn't answer him. Tantan was grief-stricken. He bawled. The black gas of that bead was unceasingly pouring into his body. He seemed to have completely forgotten about it. He was immersed in his infinite grief for a long time. The tears that flowed out were black. In fact, they were even darker than the dark night. They were just like that ink-colored bead. It seemed as if the endless black gas was pouring into his body like a great river. The black gas around the bead slowly began to thin. Finally, the black bead entered Tantan's body with a whoosh sound. Then, Tantan felt an explosion in his mind. Countless pieces of information exploded in his mind. Then, the meridians of his entire body swelled up. It seemed as if his bones were about to burst out of his body. Then, endless energy crazily gushed into his dantian from the heaven and earth. Extreme pain invaded his body and mind at this moment. His consciousness, his soul, and his primordial spirit were all affected. Then, Tantan suddenly fainted. 2 drops of ink-colored tears fell on the ground. They gradually turned from black to clear. Then, they evaporated. "I will definitely fulfill your 3 conditions. You and I will walk the path of the great Tao together." There seemed to be a voice sighing in the dark. "Everlasting, the origin of the stars. Born from the heavens and earth, the supreme devil soul." On the other side, Chu Yang went all the way to the southeast. Not long after, he felt that the call not only existed, but it was also getting stronger. The Sword of Swords Calamity sword inevitably became a tool to explore the way. Chu Yang slowly searched for it. Along the way, Chu Yang felt that some inexplicable grass and moss were getting thicker and thicker in the places he walked. The Calamity Sword's ability to absorb elixirs wasn't blocked. However, it didn't detect any effect of these grasses. They seemed to be completely useless weeds. But Chu Yang clearly realized that if the plants here were really just useless weeds, they wouldn't be able to survive in such an environment. As long as they were plants, they would always need sunlight. There must be something special about these plants. So, every time he walked a certain distance, he would carefully bend down and pull up a stalk of grass by the roots. Then, he put it into his storage ring. He was going to take it out to see what kind of plants they were. However, when he tried to pull up the first stalk of grass, Chu Yang was shocked to find that he couldn't pull it out. The grass was unexpectedly tough, and the roots were also abnormally tenacious. Chu Yang's mind turned. He immediately used his divine technique and pulled hard with his right hand. Only then did he feel that the stalk of grass was slowly moving from the ground. Then, it was slowly pulled out. Although Chu Yang couldn't see the specific situation, he could clearly feel the wonderful feeling of each strand of grass being pulled out from the ground. When he pulled out the grass, he found that it was really a stalk of grass. Even the roots were pulled out together. Not a single strand of grass was missing. It didn't even break. However, there was another strange thing. The soil on the ground wasn't pulled up at all. After Chu Yang pulled out the grass, he vaguely found that there was actually a round ball-like thing under the grass. He didn't pay much attention to it and put it into his storage ring. Then, he carefully identified the appearance of each stalk of grass nearby. Following the principle of it's a waste not to take advantage of it, he pulled out 10 stalks of grass at once before changing to the next type. Walking like this, Chu Yang felt that he had walked at least 4,000 to 5,000 feet. However, he had already pulled out hundreds of different types of weeds. Recommend a book, Introduction, a young man who walked out of the wilderness. His body is full of strange poisons, and he has 3 calamities. However, he has a life of 18 years. Immortality is ethereal, and fate is illusory. Divination doesn't change fate, and humans can go against the heavens. Everyone, go and see if it's to your liking. If you can, please add it to your collection. Chapter 2155. Although he couldn't see what they looked like, he could only rely on his sense of touch. There were 3. Some of the horns were oval, some were round, some were zigzag, and some were simply irregular. There were no more, only stalks of grass. There were also some that didn't have any special features on the surface, but the things that grew underneath were all kinds of strange things. There were calabashes, cannonballs, bamboo shoots, bowls, and even peaches. This wasn't a very long journey, but there were no less than hundreds of densely packed plants. Weeds. Moreover, as long as there was something in front, there was absolutely nothing in the back. And what was in the back, there was nothing in the front. There are at least 300 types of plants here. Chu Yang identified along the way, and finally, he found that there were no more plants in front. If he could confirm that there were no mistakes, then there were as many as 300 types of plants here. In front, there was still darkness as far as the eye could see. However, in this dark place, there was a strange feeling of infinite light. Yes, although his eyes still couldn't see any light, this was what Chu Yang felt. Between them, there was light. There was infinite light. Speaking of which, this was a problem that couldn't be explained at all. Even Chu Yang himself thought that he might have an illusion. He couldn't even see himself, so how could he feel the infinite light of the world? Wasn't this bullshit? But this feeling was real. Before he took a step, the place he was standing on was a grassland, but after he took a step, the place he was standing on became a desert. Chu Yang swallowed a mouthful of saliva and slowly walked forward. After only 3 steps, he felt that the light in front of him was becoming more and more dazzling. He even felt some pain in his eyes. But when he opened his eyes and looked out, it was still darkness. The pain caused by the dazzling light was immediately eliminated by the endless darkness. Chu Yang clearly felt that the feeling was in front of him. He made up his mind and stretched out his hand to grab it. Then, Chu Yang's hand suddenly stopped in midair, and he didn't move anymore. Chu Yang clearly felt a wisp of white light, from his fingertips, suddenly enter his body. The next moment, something rushed straight to his brain. Then, there was an endless stream of white light coming in. Chu Yang opened his eyes wide. All he felt was the constant dazzling white light. However, as soon as he opened his eyes, all he could see was darkness. The contrast of light and darkness was extreme. His vision was filled with endless darkness. However, in his consciousness, there was clearly a blazing sun in the sky. His dantian suddenly felt bloated. Chu Yang didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly used his inner vision to observe, only to see that the amount of primordial real silk in his dantian was increasing rapidly. All of a sudden, there was a loud bang. Chu Yang felt that his consciousness had instantly turned into countless fragments, wandering wantonly in the entire universe. He clearly felt a shining pearl with the light of the sun rushing into his body. As for Chu Yang's body, he lost all control in an instant. His blood vessels and meridians swelled at the same time. It was a subtle feeling of "I've really become fat with just one bite." Chu Yang swayed a few times as if he was dizzy. He thought, "What the hell is that thing?" The next moment, he lost all consciousness. He staggered and fell to the ground with a thud. A gust of dark wind blew past, and there seemed to be a voice saying softly, "Heavenly spirits and earthly spirits, black and white complement each other. All techniques return to one, the universe unifies. The great Tao is boundless, the laws are formless. The firmament is supreme, the true spirit is supreme." The moment Chu Yang fainted was also the moment Tan Tan fell to the ground like a wooden stake. The two of them lost consciousness at the same time, as if they had returned to chaos. This was indeed where the origin of the universe was. It was the part left behind after the creation of the universe that couldn't be eliminated. After hundreds of millions of years of precipitation and accumulation, it finally formed two diametrically opposed parts. Light and darkness. If this place was allowed to continue to exist and transform, perhaps after a very, very long time, it would form a new world of chaos, breaking away from this world and forming a world of its own. And such a formation of the heavenly Tao, without any external force, could be called heavenly spirits and earthly spirits. If one wanted to obtain such a fate, the conditions were extremely harsh. First, two people who had experienced life and death had to enter this place at the same time. Both of them needed to have memories of their past and present lives, and they needed to have a personal understanding of life and death. Second, these two people had to be of the same heart and mind, and they had to be of the same origin. Third, these two people's martial techniques had to be completely opposite, and they had to be righteous and evil. Fourth, the cultivation of these two people had to reach a certain level. They had to be roughly on par, and they had to be equally matched. None of these four conditions could be missing. If any one of them was missing, it wouldn't arouse the great Tao's response. To satisfy these four conditions at the same time was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Or, it could be said that it was simply impossible. Who could know about their past and future lives? Since they were of the same origin, how could they be righteous and evil? Since they were of the same origin, how could they be of the same heart and mind? This was simply a completely contradictory and awkward condition. However, it was also a reasonable and necessary condition. When the universe was created, it would inevitably be accompanied by mutual opposition. Heaven and earth, black and white, righteous and evil, good and evil. They were mutually opposed, but in fact, they were essentially the same. Therefore, none of these conditions could be missing. This mysterious place had existed for so many years, and these two imprints of the great Tao had always existed. They had never been abandoned. This was the reason why they had discovered it. And Chu Yang and Tan Tan just happened to meet these conditions. These four conditions were almost impossible to meet. Chu Yang had been reborn. He had lived two lives. And Tan Tan had the soul of a demon king in his previous life. This was the most difficult first condition to achieve. And they had already met it. Next, these two people were martial brothers. They had the same teacher. So, they were of the same origin. However, Chu Yang also had the identity of the Sword Master of Calamity. And Tan Tan also happened to have the identity of a peerless demon king. They were completely opposite, and righteous and evil didn't mix. Moreover, these two people had deep feelings for each other. They could give up everything for each other. This imperceptibly met the requirement of being of the same heart and mind. As for the last condition, the cultivation of these two people was more or less equal. So, it became secondary. But, this was also quite coincidental. Chu Yang's cultivation was slightly higher. But, it was the Demon King who had led the battle after entering this place. So, Tan Tan's cultivation had increased to about the same level as Chu Yang's. So far, these four harsh conditions that were almost impossible to meet had been completely met. Therefore, these two people could feel the existence of the imprints of the great Tao. Chu Yang was in a deep coma. He could only feel that someone was constantly talking to him. But, he couldn't hear what the other party was saying. Only a few words were very clear. Get rid of them. Your way, the way of heaven, somewhere far away. There was a blue planet here. A white-clothed youth was lying on a soft bag between two trees. He was swaying back and forth. He looked very comfortable. Suddenly, he seemed to have sensed something. He opened his eyes, and the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of an inexplicable smile. Then, he snapped his fingers. Old Black, where are you? After he snapped his fingers, a dense space crack suddenly appeared in front of him. A voice came from afar. I'm in the middle of a battle. The white-clothed youth laughed. Then, a black-clothed youth silently came out of a space crack. He had his hands behind his back. He looked extremely arrogant. However, there were a few bruises at the corners of his eyes. The corners of his mouth were also a little red and swollen. It seemed that he had just been beaten up by someone. You said you're fighting? I think you're getting beaten up, right? The white-clothed youth shook his feet. You still have the nerve to mock me. Those few senior brothers of yours are too inhumane. They couldn't take me down one-on-one, so they actually joined forces to besiege me. Damn it. The black-clothed youth cursed angrily. Each one of them is a big shot on par with me, and the 5 of them actually ganged up on me. Aren't they embarrassed? Their skin is almost as thick as yours. The white-clothed youth laughed. That's why I never go to that place. Unless I'm sure there's only one person there. The black-clothed youth snorted and suddenly flew into a rage. You told me this time that there was only one person. But when I got old, everyone was gathered there for a meeting. Damn it, this beating was really solid. You bastard, are you trying to harm me? The white-clothed youth revealed a pure expression and said, if I don't harm you, who would I harm? Didn't you say that I'm thick-skinned? If I don't do something thick-skinned, how can I be worthy of you? The black-clothed youth was furious when he heard this. He was about to fly into a rage and start a fight. But, he didn't know why, but his expression suddenly eased down. Then, he burst into laughter, but, this fight was really enjoyable. I haven't had such a good time in a long time. Tell me, what do you want from me this time? The person we chose before, seems to have an accident now. The white-clothed youth's face had a gentle smile like a spring breeze, a big accident. I hate this kind of behavior of yours the most. The black-clothed youth said disdainfully, you're clearly a murderous bastard who would destroy an entire world if you don't like it. But, you pretend to be gentle and warm every day. You're just fooling yourself. Then, he said, you mean that little guy had an accident? What accident? You don't understand. This is called demeanor. Only real experts have this kind of demeanor. The white-clothed youth smiled politely and evilly, you're from the underworld. You know nothing. The black-clothed youth slanted his mouth and eyes, do you want to fight? If you do, just say it. The white-clothed youth laughed, look at you today. How can I have the nerve to bully you? It's just that this matter is really interesting. The black-clothed youth said, how is it interesting? Tell me. The little guy now has the chance to get rid of the path we set for him and walk on his own path. The white-clothed youth smiled faintly. Thanksgiving Day. I wish everyone a happy life. I hope everyone can enjoy it. Thank you again, my brothers and sisters. I hope that our lives will be filled with gratitude. There will be many more beautiful things. I also encourage myself to not forget to be grateful to everyone. I always remind myself that without you, I am nothing. Chapter 2156. Hey, there's such a thing. That's impossible, right? The young man in black was surprised. He couldn't help but be surprised. With their abilities, they had set up the path. Now, there was actually someone who could jump out of it. This was really an anomaly. This is a good thing. The young man in white smiled gently. Old Black, perhaps you will have a new opponent soon, and not just one. The young man in black laughed. I hope so. Since there's already an anomaly, we might as well wait and see. This will save us a lot of trouble. Whether there's an anomaly or not, it doesn't matter. However, wasn't the path of the Great Tao already full before? I've never heard of this thing having the possibility of increasing. The young man in black frowned. Why would there suddenly be an anomaly? This is against destiny. The young man in white smiled faintly. Destiny? You're lying to yourself. Who can say for sure about this kind of thing? With an anomaly like you and me, the destiny has long changed. Just like the current situation, either you or I can erase this anomaly or even seal the imprint of the Great Tao forever. Is it that difficult? Why do you have to lie to yourself and others? Let me ask you, if there are only a few of us at our level, wouldn't it be too boring? His eyes flashed with an inexplicable color. He said softly, only when there are more people will there be more exciting things. Who knows if there's no higher level than you and me? If we can reach a higher level, what will it be like? The black-clothed youth shook his head and smiled bitterly. I don't think there will be any more. At our level, We can already destroy the galaxy with a wave of our hand, and change the world with a snap of our fingers. If there is a higher level, it is really hard to imagine. Hard to imagine doesn't necessarily mean there won't be any. The young man in white said seriously. If you already believe there won't be any, then it'll be hard to improve. It might not even be hard to imagine. At least now, to destroy the galaxy and change the world, you still need to raise your hand and flick your finger. It's not something that can be done with just a thought. The black-clothed youth frowned and nodded. That makes sense. Then, he said, since there's an anomaly, there's always an anomaly. I'll go take a look at that little one. That little one actually managed to break through the path we set for him. That little one is truly beyond our expectations. What he has now is no longer the opportunity and luck that we gave him. Instead, it's his own great opportunity and great luck. The white-clothed young man lazily laid down on the soft bag and began to sway. He said lazily, "Remember to tell me that you've been too lazy to move recently." The black-clothed young man was infuriated when he saw this. He strode forward and said angrily, "Who do you think I am? Do you think I'm a servant that you can order around as you please?" The young man in white closed his eyes and said lazily, "Wives, someone is causing trouble. Beat him up." As soon as he heard this, the black-clothed youth disappeared with a whoosh. He only left behind one word, "Bah." He had no choice but to run in this situation. This bastard's wives were also experts. The main reason was that he couldn't fight back at all. If he stayed, he would be looking for trouble. How could a wise man be so unwise? On the other side, the people who were waiting for the return of the two people in the endless darkness slowly began to feel strange. Rather than saying that it was strange, it would be more appropriate to say that it was unsettling. Chu Yang and Tan Tan had been away from the crowd for quite some time. Half a day had already passed. Why hadn't they returned yet? Could it be that something unexpected had happened? This Yama Gorge had once buried many saint-level expert. "Everyone, don't worry. My brother will definitely return." Chu Li comforted them confidently. "Let me tell you, you've only been with my brother for a short period of time. Ever since my brother made his debut, he single-handedly overturned the entire dynasty. At that time, he was only a martial arts great master. He was still far from the lowest Xian level in the Heaven Imperial Court. Even if the gap wasn't 10,000 times, it was at least 1,000 times. Later on, he also used his own strength to regulate the martial world in our world. He even led his brothers to purge the evil forces in the entire world. Only then did he ascend to the Heaven Imperial Court. Although my brother was young, he had already experienced hundreds and thousands of battles in his life. Almost every time, he won from the weak against the strong and escaped from death. He never did things that he wasn't confident in. Everyone, just relax. Since he hasn't returned after such a long time, there must be a reason for him not to return. There's no need to worry." Chu Le's words, which were full of confidence, shook the crowd violently. Was this little girl speaking the truth? Overturning a dynasty with a strength that wasn't much stronger than an ant's? Regulating the martial world? Purging the entire world? Did Chu Yang do all of this alone? Actually, there's actually no difference between our original hometown and the current Heaven Imperial Court. In our hometown, he dared to challenge the strongest clan in the Heaven Imperial Court with just a few people. Here, he similarly killed the Heavenly Emperor and offended the entire Black Cloud Heaven. He ignored the dignity of a Heavenly Emperor. When everyone thought that he definitely wouldn't survive, didn't he still lead everyone all the way till now? Chu Le took a breath and said, "There's something that's hard to say. Perhaps everyone doesn't believe it. Actually, in my brother's heart, killing a so-called Heavenly Emperor really isn't a big deal. If he killed him, then so be it." Chu Le smiled proudly. "My brother has done many similar things in the past." Everyone fainted. Done many similar things in the past. Yarrow Ningning also grinned. No wonder those two big bosses didn't seem to care about my identity at all. It turns out that in their eyes, I'm just a piece of trash that can be killed anytime. Since there's nothing else, why don't Miss Chu tell us about the village lord's past? The matter of challenging the strongest clan in the village lord's old home that you mentioned just now really fascinates us. Bai Yuchen acutely sensed that this might be a great opportunity to raise morale. Sure. Chu Le hesitated for a while before she agreed. I'll tell you all as you recuperate and cultivate. I reckon that my brother and brother Tan will probably take a very long time before they return. Everyone has plenty of time. My older brother was separated from his parents when he was young. This is what happened. Thus, with Chu Le's vivid narration, everyone felt like they were listening to a heavenly book, and they entered a mysterious and unfathomable story. Every step that Chu Yang took was filled with hardships, and he had experienced many dangers. Every goal was like that. Everyone didn't think highly of him. Everyone thought that Chu Yang would definitely fail and die, but this person managed to break through every obstacle and succeed every time. Things that were completely impossible, he succeeded in the end. Chu Le recounted everything one by one. Even these martial saints, heavenly humans and even martial saints felt incredulous. Was this really something that a person could do? Chu Yang's life was colorful and full of stories. There were too many things that were worth telling. Gradually, everyone was drawn into this mysterious story. Their emotions fluctuated along with the story. For a moment, they completely forgot about the passage of time. When Chu Yang woke up again, he didn't know how much time had passed. He tried to curl his fingers and realized that he could move them freely. Then, he tried to circulate the internal energy in his body, but was instantly shocked. It was just a slight thought, but the heaven-level divine technique in his body suddenly flowed rapidly like a river. There was a light feeling all over his body. Chu Yang suspected that if a gust of wind happened to blow over, it might blow him away. In a moment, he had already changed from lying down to standing up. He circulated his internal energy all over his body. He didn't find any abnormalities in his body, but there was a big abnormality on the surface of his body. His entire body was covered in a sticky substance. When he touched it with his hand, he realized that it was a layer of mucus that was still emitting a foul smell. He hurriedly circulated his internal energy to gather the moisture and washed his body a few times. Only then did he get rid of this disgusting smell. Then, he circulated his internal energy to examine his body carefully. However, he found an even bigger abnormality. His dantian was completely different from before. At this moment, every dantian was filled with dazzling golden silk balls. In addition, there were some white granules of unknown origin in his body. They almost filled every part of his muscles and meridians. Chu Yang could clearly feel that every particle was filled with an indescribable and astonishing power. Obviously, his dantian had reached a point where it couldn't contain any more. That was why these purest aggregations of power were temporarily dispersed in his body. These changes were still within Chu Yang's understanding. However, there was another change that made Chu Yang really shocked. That's right, not shocked, but shocked. In each of his dantians, there was actually a tiny human the size of a soybean faintly existing. His entire body was emitting a golden glow. He was meditating with his eyes closed, looking very solemn. What the fuck? Chu Yang's hair all stood on end. This, could it be that I'm pregnant? And it's triplets at once. This thought that made one's hair stand on end. He really didn't dare to continue thinking about it. This kind of strange situation was really unheard of. Even the legends didn't spread like this. Previously, he had only heard Xue Leihan say that at Xue Leihan's level, the dantian was probably just the purple aura golden liquid, but he had never heard of someone being able to cultivate a tiny human in his dantian through cultivation. Chu Yang was extremely conflicted. What exactly was going on? These tiny humans were extremely inconspicuous. Each of them was only the size of a soybean. However, each of them had arms, legs, noses and eyes. Their facial features were all present. It seemed that their figures were also divided according to the golden ratio. In terms of figures, they were probably better than Chu Yang himself. Chapter 2157. On that blue planet, a young man in white who was watching the waves turned his head thoughtfully, looked at the void, and murmured with a smile, "Right now, I am also very happy, because I am also very much looking forward to the day when I will fight with you." An extraordinarily beautiful woman turned her head and smiled gently. "Who are you looking forward to fighting with? There is actually such a wonderful person in the universe." The young man in white smiled evilly, stretched out his hand, and pulled the beauty into his arms. "The person I am looking forward to the most is to fight with you. Don't you think so, Qinghan?" The beautiful woman's face suddenly turned red, and she struggled hard. "Go and fight with big sister Mai. Why are you looking for me?" When elder sister Mai was mentioned, the young man's face immediately turned bitter and bitter. He sighed and said, "When it comes to her, I really don't know what to do. Qinghan, you have to be the judge. What kind of life have I been living? I'm in an abyss of suffering, bitter hatred. It's hard to explain." The beautiful woman was surprised. "What's wrong with big sister Mai? Why do you say that?" The young man in white sighed helplessly. "You judge for me. I just want her to return to her original form, and then let me pinch her little butt to play with. I really miss the feeling of that time. Sigh, it's such a simple request, but it hasn't been fulfilled even once after so many years, and every time I ask for it, I will be met with cold violence. This, I really can't live anymore, fut." The beautiful woman laughed on the spot. "This is purely you looking for trouble. You actually want big sister Mai to return to her original form and let you do that? What the hell are you thinking? Did you eat the wrong medicine? You want me to judge for you?" As she spoke, her face suddenly turned red. The young man in white laughed, and said with a salivating face, "Sigh, I really ate the wrong medicine. I instantly felt cold. I am freezing to death. Quickly help me warm up, come on." The woman in white immediately pouted, but the young man in white held her in an overbearing manner, and didn't let her leave. Then, the young man in white snapped his fingers, and the two immediately disappeared from the place. Vaguely, the young man in white said, "Come. I'll fight with you first, and then I'll seek revenge from your big sister." Chu Yang heaved a long sigh of relief as he regained clarity of mind. At this moment, he really felt like he had gained something. New life, the subtle feeling. He was about to go back when he heard Tan Tan's panic-stricken and bewildered voice, "Senior Marshal Brother. Chu Yang, where are you?" Chu Yang was overjoyed. Being able to speak is a good thing. Tan Tan has also completed it. He hurriedly said, "I'm here." His voice hadn't faded away when Tan Tan stumbled over and hugged him. "Senior Marshal Brother, boo-hoo boo-hoo." She actually burst into tears. Chu Yang was startled when he saw this. "What's wrong?" Tan Tan was such an idiot who would be covered if the sky fell down. But he actually had a time when he would cry bitterly. How could this be? As far as Chu Yang knew, it would only be possible if one of the three people had died to make Tan Tan cry like this. The first was that Tan Tan's teacher, Meng Chao Ran, had immortalized. This option didn't seem very likely. The second was that Tan Tan's other half, Xie Dan Feng, had ascended to immortality. This option was also impossible. She was clearly still in the tribulation space. As for the third person, it was even more impossible. After all, the third person was Chu Yang himself. But what was the reason for Tan Tan to act like this? He heard Tan Tan say while crying, "The two things that happened just now made me extremely sad. I'm in so much pain that I don't want to live. I'd rather die than live. What's wrong? What's wrong?" Chu Yang tensed up. Two such serious things happened. He disappeared. Tan Tan opened his mouth, and his hoarse throat broke into bitter sobs. His momentum was earth-shattering. He disappeared. Who is he? Who disappeared? Chu Yang scratched his head. He couldn't understand what was going on. Tan Tan's words weren't clear. No one could understand him. He disappeared. He's the one inside my body. Tan Tan was endlessly grieving. The Devil King's soul has disappeared forever. It's him. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. An inexplicable feeling of relief emerged in his heart. That Devil King's soul had been inside Tan Tan's body. So, Chu Yang had always felt uneasy. Now that it had disappeared, he could heave a big sigh of relief. But Tan Tan was suffering right now. So, Chu Yang certainly couldn't say what he was thinking. He could only comfort him. There's no such thing as an eternal banquet in this world. Tan Tan, you have to understand that he's a special existence that doesn't belong to this world. He's just a passerby for you. His disappearance is inevitable. It's just a matter of time. It's good that he's gone now. Tan Tan sobbed and nodded, but I can't bear to part with him. I really can't bear to part with him. I'd rather not have that great Tao imprint. I'd rather have him exist. Why did he choose to disappear? I really don't want him to help me. I'd rather have everyone exist, Chu Yang sighed. He secretly thought that Tan Tan could only slowly recover by himself in this matter. The effect of his persuasion was very limited. In fact, it was basically equivalent to being useless. So, he hastily changed the topic, and said, "What's the other matter?" Tan Tan burst into tears. "I don't want to live. I can't live. I'm so ashamed. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo." Chu Yang was startled. "So serious?" Could it be that Tan Tan has encountered another unforeseen event? How is it so shameful? What happened? What happened to him? What's the matter? What's the matter? Aren't you afraid to tell me? Chu Yang anxiously asked. I, 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 I am pregnant. The corner of Chu Yang's mouth twitched, and twitched again, and twitched again. So it turned out that after this opportunity, this fellow was similar to himself. Inside his body, there was also that little person. Chu Yang had already figured out what was going on after many explorations. He didn't know the specific situation, but he was certain that it wasn't a pregnancy. Rather, it was a kind of mystical martial technique. The heavenly imperial palace martial technique has never been seen before. Chu Yang's playful heart flourished when he saw Tan Tan's pitiful state. He couldn't help but raise his brows. "You're pregnant? Who did it? Do you know who it is?" Tan Tan cried until he was hovering between life and death. "I also don't know who did it. How did I get pregnant in such an inexplicable manner? A small person has appeared in my body. A small person has clearly appeared in my body. I don't want to live anymore." Chu Yang almost spurted out his tears. These words were too ambiguous and awkward. It was as if he had been gang-raped. He didn't even know whose child it was. Tan Tan's face was full of panic. He grabbed Chu Yang. "Senior Marshal Brother, my dear Senior Marshal Brother, I don't dare to let Dan Feng know about this. By the way, you're a divine doctor. You have to think of a way to help me. Save me. See if you can remove this vile spawn from my body." "Vile spawn? Remove it. Remove it." Chu Yang's complexion was extremely strange. He thought, "You're only pregnant with one, and you're already shouting so loudly. You're full of twins. Wouldn't you cry to death if you had the same thought?" Although he didn't know the specifics, Chu Yang was very sure of one thing. If we really come up with a way to get rid of those villains, I'm afraid that both of us will become crippled in an instant. Cough cough. "I say, Tan Tan, you don't actually have one," Chu Yang said. It was really too awkward. A certain king of hell didn't know how to express himself clearly for a moment. "How can I not? I saw it. I really have one." For some reason, Tan Tan, who usually didn't understand Chu Yang's words, actually understood at once. He even continued. "You're really not pregnant," Chu Yang said with a headache. "Senior Marshal Brother, you don't need to comfort me. I saw it clearly. I'm really pregnant. I really don't need to comfort you. Quickly think of a way to get rid of it," Tan Tan urged anxiously. "What the hell? You still don't want to listen? Listen to me clearly. I'm a divine doctor. I'm seriously telling you that you're not pregnant." Chu Yang was at his wit's end. He could only use the expert's means to forcefully explain. "Ah, isn't this pregnancy? Really not?" Tan Tan raised his head with tears in his eyes. "Yes, definitely not." "Do you only have one of those small people?" Chu Yang asked. "Yes, one is already amazing. Could it be that there's three?" Then I don't know what to do, Tan Tan said very discontentedly. Obviously, he was very dissatisfied with Chu Yang's ignorance. Cough, you only have one and you don't know what to do. The old one has one. Even if you really have three, the old one has 3 times more than you. Chu Yang's face was distorted. What? Tan Tan looked at him with a face full of shock. He suddenly jumped up. You got pregnant in one go? Senior Marshal brother, you're too strong. Although I've heard of multiple births, I've never heard of so many. Can you give birth in the future? Chu Yang was furious. What do you mean by pregnant in one go? Give birth to what? Do you want to give birth? Tan Tan suddenly stopped crying. Then, he actually took pleasure in Chu Yang's misfortune. Waha. So you're also pregnant. Then I'm relieved. Moreover, you're actually a ha ha ha. Then I'll just follow your pace and see how you adapt. I'll just follow and learn. Anyway, if I lose face, it won't just be me. The risk on your side is at least twice as high as mine. As he spoke, he actually became complacent. I find that I'm becoming more and more brilliant. It turns out that I'm even stronger than Senior Marshal brother. Chu Yang was speechless. He couldn't help but kick him. In the sky, a black-clothed man listened to the conversation between the two of them. His whole body was twitching with laughter. He almost went crazy. The old one hasn't been so happy in so many years. Chapter 2158. The black-clothed man laughed so hard that his entire body was cramping. I never thought that I would discover such a strange thing as soon as I came here to take a look. These two idiots walked on the right path with great difficulty, and gave birth to nascent souls. But, they thought that they were pregnant, and their nascent souls had turned into vile spawns. And, they wanted to get rid of them. People who can be so stupid in this world are really rare. This old man has really broadened his horizons this time. This guy seemed to have lost his sense of measure due to his complacency. So much so that he had laughed out loud later on. Chu Yang and Tan Tan discovered it at the same time. So, they shouted, Who? Who is it? The black-clothed man flashed, and disappeared without a trace. He flew for thousands or tens of thousands of miles before he finally stopped. Then, he clutched his stomach, and started to laugh crazily again. He laughed so hard that tears and snot were flowing down his face. It had to be said that today's matter had extremely serious consequences. So much so that it had become the lifelong shame of Minister Chu Yang and Lord Demon Emperor. These two bad guys would then use this conversation to threaten the two of them. And, this would often lead to a heaven-shaking battle. Do you want to fight with me? If you don't fight me, I'll announce it to the world. Come, come, come. Do you want to fight or not? Could it be that you are pregnant again? Chu Yang and Tan Tan would often bristle with anger after hearing these two sentences. And, they would have no choice but to fight. The two of them walked back as light as a feather. Tan Tan had also finally accepted the explanation of this is the result of a high-level cultivation. So, he slowly felt relieved. However, this time, they walked back. And, it was different. The two of them flew back as light as a feather. They didn't need to use their swords to explore the way. It seemed that they already knew where the obstacles ahead were. And, everything was going according to their wishes. It seems that my cultivation has advanced a lot. Tan Tan was somewhat proud of himself. It seems that handsome people have some benefits. Chu Yang sighed. My junior martial brother is still my junior martial brother. This person is still the same person no matter what kind of opportunity he has. In fact, it wasn't just a huge improvement in cultivation. The extent of his improvement this time was so great that even Chu Yang himself felt that it was somewhat unimaginable. It was a little too astonishing. Chu Yang estimated that he had most likely already reached the peak of the celestial being level. The so-called limit of the celestial being level, the door to the saint level, was just a step away. He could become a saint at any time. Even though Chu Yang often made leaps and bounds like this, he still felt a little unaccustomed to the progress this time. After all, no matter how much heaven and earth Yuan Qi was raised in the past, even leaping over 20 realms in one go, The amount of heaven and earth yuan qi required to raise half a realm was not as much as the amount required now. The amount of energy required to advance from the elementary level to the advanced level of celestial being was roughly equivalent to the sum of first-grade supreme martial artist to second-grade supreme martial artist, and 10 times more. And the amount of yuan qi required to advance from the first level to the higher level was several times more than the initial level. Under such circumstances, he had leaped from the peak of the beginner level of the celestial being realm to the peak of the celestial being realm, and could even reach the legendary sage realm at any time. This was a special situation that was close to becoming a Buddha on the spot. Peak of the celestial being realm. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. And although he had not really verified it at this moment, he vaguely felt that his peak of the celestial being realm was probably different from other people's peak of the celestial being realm. And it was not only because of the difference in the number of dantians, because this difference alone was not enough to prove his suspicions. Chu Yang felt that he was really full of confidence now. It was a kind of strong confidence that he would dare to face any enemy with his sword and be able to win. It was not conceit, not arrogance, but confidence. Genuine confidence, unparalleled confidence. This unprecedented confidence came from the fact that they were twins. Chu Yang even vaguely felt that as long as he wanted to use power, that little one would immediately provide him with inexhaustible power. This feeling was very subtle. Chu Yang did not know where it came from, but it was so real that he could not doubt it. I am now one step away from the peak of the celestial being realm. Sigh. Tan Tan felt that his strength had improved greatly. He was excited but also a little depressed. Why was he always one step weaker than Chu Yang? In order to help him, even the Demon King's soul was sacrificed. Why was he still one step weaker than Chu Yang? If someone else had heard these words from his heart, perhaps even Di who would have caught Tan Tan and swallowed him alive before speaking again. You fucking improved from saint level to high level celestial being realm in an instant, and you are still not satisfied. And you still feel sad. Even this fucking se is not as sad as you. The two of them, one in front and one behind, floated back, a little dizzy. A big pie fell from the sky. I ate it, I swallowed it, I caught it. But I was also knocked out at the same time. I was really knocked out. The two of them had the same feeling. It was real. At this moment, Chu Le had already drunk water 13 times. She was still spitting saliva everywhere as she talked about Chu Yang's legendary stories. Chu Le had heard these stories countless times from Jiu Duxing, Luo Kedi, Ji Mo, Zi Sheqing, and Rui Butong. Especially many stories in the upper three heavens, Chu Le had personally participated in them. Based on her endless admiration for her big brother, Chu Le had been racking her brains to find out everything about her big brother's past. This also added a lot of credibility to today's narration. Everyone, including Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma, listened attentively without any distractions. It was as if they were intoxicated and couldn't extricate themselves. They were completely drawn into Chu Yang's legendary story from head to toe. As an orphan, he grew up painstakingly. When he was in his 20s, his strength was weak. He entered the empire alone. In just a few days, he became a popular and powerful figure. With a wave of his butcher's knife, blood flowed like a river. In a month's time, the image of the bloody and mysterious king of Hell Chu was molded. He dug out all the spies one by one, toyed with all the enemies in the palm of his hand, strategized, and easily became a saint. He entered Great Zhao alone, entered the heart of the enemy, and stirred up the flames of war. After that, he was chased for 8,000 miles. Tens of thousands of people chased after one person. After surviving 100 deaths, he decided the outcome of the battle on the battlefield and made the biggest empire in the lower three heavens suffer under his hand. He entered the upper three heavens alone. In a short period of time, he battled with all the big clans in a battle of wits and strength. Along the way, he struggled between life and death. In the end, he turned the entire upper three heavens into the backyard of Chu Yang and his brothers. He entered the upper three heavens alone and shook the world with the title of a divine doctor. He disrupted the medicine banquet, resisted the law enforcement officers, battled the Dharma Supreme, befriended the Moonbreeze Pavilion, ascended to immortality with a sword, settled the chaos in the world of ice and snow with a sword, and walked proudly in the martial world, unrivaled in the world. It seemed that there wasn't a single one of Chu Yang's deeds that didn't involve him going through extremely dangerous situations. He was always walking on a tightrope. Even though it was narrated by Chu Le, everyone felt that their chests were heavy and they felt a little breathless. It was really hard to imagine that there was actually someone who had gone through so many life and death situations all the way until now and still hadn't fallen. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma sighed deeply in their hearts. The two of them recalled all the famous people that they had met and heard of. There was really no one who could be mentioned in the same breath as Chu Yang's experience. Compared to Chu Yang, they instantly felt that all the dangers that they had encountered previously and the so-called life and death battles were really not worth mentioning. Because Chu Yang had always spent his days in ambush from all sides. This kind of person, unless he is willing, otherwise, he will definitely not fall. Uncle Hu let out a long sigh. Yarrow Ningning was extremely agitated when she heard that. Her face flushed red, and her admiration for Chu Yang instantly rose to a level that no one in the past or in the future could ever surpass. Boss is actually such an awesome existence. Every single one of the things mentioned here was an immortal legend, even if they were picked out individually. With so many legends linked together, that was a legend, that was a myth, that was a miracle. And this legend was still going on. The most fortunate thing was that he was by this legend's side. What was even more fortunate was that he had become his brother. He didn't know how many incense sticks he had burned in his previous 3, 5, or 7 generations to be able to receive such a blessing. Thank the heavens, thank the earth, thank the gods and Buddhas, and thank Big Brother Tan the most. If not for him, I wouldn't have met Big Brother Chu. Chu Le's saliva flew everywhere as she spoke for a long time. She had just reached the time when Chu Yang had gone up to the upper 3 heavens. Right at this moment, Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma's expressions suddenly turned cold and their hair stood on end. The reason was very simple. These two people with the highest cultivation levels felt at the same time that there were 2 huge waves of pressure coming towards them. If the owners of these 2 waves of pressure were enemies, then it would be too scary. There were 2 reasons why it was scary. Firstly, in such a special geographical environment, the fewer people there were on the opposing side, the easier it would be to control the battle situation. Previously, they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers and only needed to fight back with all their strength. Almost all they could see were enemies. But now, once the battle started, at least 30% of their attention had to be focused on their own people. If they were not careful, they might hit their own people. The previous disadvantage was only the environmental factor. Although it would greatly reduce their battle power, they might still have a chance of winning. But the second scary factor was hard to eliminate. Uncle Hu and Uncle Ma had only slightly sensed this faint aura, but they immediately knew that the 2 of them were definitely not a match for these 2 people. Their hearts beat like drums at the same time. When did the enemy have 2 peerless experts of this level? They looked at each other and felt that their palms were already full of sweat. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.